we will determine the presence of a quorum. Mr. Hayworth, may you please call the roll to help determine the quorum.
Dr. Gazoo.
Present.
Mr. Chen.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Dr. OLeary.
Here.
Dr. Sutter.
Present.
Thompson.
Present.
Dr. Reed.
Present.
Mr. Patterson.
Present.
President Parker.
Present.
Ms. Lopez.
Present.
Ms. Lee. And shortly, we will also have a new Ms. Bernstein, but we will wait for a second for that one. Mr. President, you have quorum.
Thank you. Members, before we move on, I wanted to give you an update about adjustments to the agenda, as well as letting members of the public know that we will entertain the swearing in of our newest proposed student representative, Ms. Lee Bernstein, who we're thrilled to have. If you recall, we had 2 student vacancies after the resignations of Mr. Ian Bowie and Alex O'Sullivan, and we are thrilled to have Ms. Bernstein serve as one of our student representatives as we look to fill the final slot. Before I do the swearing in and proceed with the meeting, though, I do want to just level set on the agenda. So we will have this swearing in, which should only take minutes, followed by a very brief leadership report and executive director report. As I communicated to you all offline, given everything going on in our schools, I thought it was pretty important that we carve out space and time to discuss what's happening in our schools amid the latest COVID surge. So we will adjust the agenda. And so from about I have here 5:07 to about 5:37. So for about 30 minutes, we will entertain that discussion. And the hope there is that you will elevate things that you're hearing or seeing in your schools, as well as questions or concerns you may have. Staff will be taking notes, and then we will take appropriate action depending on what comes out of our discussion. Following that, we will have members of OSSE join us to discuss the school report card website updates. They will be with us for about 40 minutes. I have that ending at about 6:15. We will then go into our STAR framework recommendations. I have that going on just shy of an hour, and that will be 6:15 to about 7:20. We'll talk much more about what that entails. We'll have leadership announcements for about 20 minutes, and then we'll conclude with committee reports as well as new business. For members of the public, I would strongly encourage you to stick around to the end of the meeting. We will have some time to recognize outgoing student representative Alex O'Sullivan, and we will do that in the new business portion of the meeting. So with that, Ms. Bernstein, welcome again. If you could please raise your right hand, and members, if again, you could turn your cameras off momentarily, I'll signal when you should turn them back on. And Ms. Bernstein, please repeat after me. I, Lee Bernstein, do solemnly swear
Lee Bernstein, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the laws of the United States of America
that I will faithfully execute the laws of the United States of America
and of the District of Columbia
and of the District of Columbia,
and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of member of the District of Columbia State Board of Education, which I am about to enter. Congratulations, Ms. Bernstein. We are thrilled to have you as a student representative. For members of the public, we empowered our student advisory committee to review and nominate amongst their peers. And I hear Ms. Bernstein came with a resounding endorsement. And so again, congratulations.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Members, you may turn your cameras back on, and we will proceed with our meeting. Next up, just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep this brief for our leadership report. I just want to reiterate for the public what I've already communicated to you all, and that is just a sentiment of thanks and appreciation for all of the great work that the board has contributed to over this past year, including our work around literacy and outdoor reading events, in efforts to enhance our social studies standards, research our board governance structures, as well as what we're going to talk about tonight, advance recommendations for our STAR framework. This year has been a tremendous one, all the while very difficult given that the pandemic has continued on. But I am heartened by Ms. Bernstein as well as our other student representatives that this year coming up will be even more impactful. So I will leave it there and move to our executive director report.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I apologize again for my audio and visual difficulties. The only thing I have to report is to ensure everyone is checking their emails related to upcoming meetings. The meeting list has now been sent, and all of the meeting invites should be in your email box. If you have any questions or need additional ones, please let us know. And the second thing would be to remember a couple upcoming dates, including our upcoming retreat on February 4th, as well as our upcoming performance oversight hearings and budget hearings in March. And you will be getting additional information as we get closer. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Moving right along for the sake of time, we're going to jump into our discussion around the state of our schools amid the latest COVID surge. And so, again, the hope here is that we will just elevate things that we're seeing and hearing in our respective wards or across the city, elevate questions for students. I'm especially interested in hearing how your experience has gone, or what your anxieties or concerns are as you're approaching returning to school or as you're continuing with school. How we're going to do this, please raise your hand. We're going to have 2-minute rounds. I know that may not feel sufficient, but just for the sake of time, we want to make sure we carve out space. If time allots, we can go for some members to have a second round, should not everyone want to share. I would just preface this by the latest announcement that and I'm sure many of us heard today from our largest 3 LEAs. As we know, there were tests to return policies for all of them. That is DCPS, KIP, as well as Friendship. It is my understanding that Friendship and DCPS are slated to return to school tomorrow, with the idea that those COVID negative tests were supposed to be uploaded today. There has been some discrepancies with the system for DCPS, and there were recommendations around how parents could notify their schools of their COVID negative tests, which I know I've heard, as well as I'm sure you have, that parents are really concerned about. It's also my understanding of Representative Patterson, I'm sure you can correct me, that KIP is planning to return to school on Monday in person for students, but that there are 2 tests that are being required for students to upload to their respective portals. So with that preface, members, if you could just raise your hand and just elevate things that you're hearing, seeing, or questions or concerns you may have. And I will call you as I see hands go up. First up, we have Representative Patterson. And Darren, if you could run the clock so I could see the time, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And I'll be quick, President Parker, and thank you for referencing where I worked during the day, because I spent all morning and this afternoon distributing tests, and that is correct. We will be back in person on Monday at KIP DC. And what I found out from doing this, and our leadership team actually moving to a Monday is that we got really positive responses from parents and from our teachers as well, that we're administering 2 tests. They can take the test today or tomorrow and upload it. We're providing them a way that they can upload it and make sure. Then they're taking another test on Saturday, which they can also upload to make sure. So they get 2 tests, of course, in each package, and then they'll be uploaded. The thing is to really hear teachers and to listen to parents. And that's what we did at KIPP to make sure of that. I'm hearing the same thing from a lot of emails that I'm receiving as a representative, that they just wanted a little bit more time to make sure that we heard them, that we could really go through and take the test, take multiple tests if needed, and then give them at least till the weekend and come back Monday. I've been hearing that a lot. And we tried to respond to it in my day job. And so that's basically the gist of what I've been hearing. It's just people just wanted a little bit more time to make sure that they could upload the test, that they had the opportunity to see that it was working, that the system was working, and that they could get credible feedback on that. And then also credible instructions on what to do if they were positive. There's a lot of confusion as to if you do test positive, then what? So I think there's some communications that need to go out about that. What people do from each LEA and from DCPS of how when they're identified as positive, how we responded to that, and when will kids be able to come back. So thank you.
No, thank you. That's really helpful. Representative Reed.
Hi. So far, I haven't had direct outreach yet from Ward 8 residents, but the most part, it's been some of the advocacy has something coming from folks from other wards with some protocols that I think most of us would be like, we've understood, we've saw before in regards to high quality masks, clear matrix, those kind of issues. I would just raise that I would be a little concerned, having worked in a school before, about similar what Representative Patterson was saying, what do you do with a COVID test when you're coming to the building? So are people going to be kept warm? I had a lot of people give feedback in the beginning of the year about just the holdup of lines going into schools. And that's just something I'm kind of using my educator lens to be like, is that going to be an issue? How do we work through that as people are checking results? And then something that I'll be raising during the Outreach and Advocacy Committee, which I will say has been a direct ask from Ward 8 residents, is related to social and emotional learning, or not maybe social emotional learning, but I've been getting a lot of requests about bullying and just really intense behavioral needs outside of the more health protocols. I'm not saying those aren't happening and those aren't a concern, but in regards directly for my residents, it has been some issues around social emotional things and things that they're seeing spikes in behavior. So I wanted to raise that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know Representative OLeary has been flagging now for months the behavioral needs of various school communities. So that tracks across the city. Representative OLeary.
Good evening, everyone. I'll just give you a short list of things that are wrong. I can't understand why schools are opening tomorrow, especially after God provided us with not being able to open up on Monday, and also it's supposed to snow tomorrow night. It makes absolutely no sense. I've been hearing that schools are going to be really short of security guards tomorrow. I don't know if you've heard of anything like that. The staff shortages are still the same. Substitutes are still non-existent. They haven't been able to make clear to become substitutes, even though the money's gone up. Principals and assistant principals and all other people in the buildings are still covering classrooms. I'm not even going to get into what's going on with the testing, which was just, the numbers were amazing in Ward 4 yesterday, the number of people that picked up tests at the schools. The only good thing that's been done in this whole plan for testing, as far as I'm concerned, is yesterday they finally decided to let you go to your neighborhood school and pick up a test. And last but far from least, we were promised by the mayor in October that each school was going to get COVID help, so the principals didn't have to do all the COVID work, and no schools have received any help at all. Sorry to be so negative. I just tested negative.
Thank you, Representative OLeary. Next, we will hear from Representative Chen.
Thank you, President Parker. So I've heard from my constituents both asks to move virtual and asks for reasons that we know, and those include, the challenges of virtual learning and having to reorganize work schedules and at home, and of course asks to move virtual for safety reasons. I've also heard demands to increase the frequency and prevalence of asymptomatic testing, and several notes around test to stay. And Councilmember Pento's team actually asked Aussie about test to stay the last couple days, and the response was that CDC guidelines only require test to stay for children without vaccines. And I know her team is going to be following up this week to ask for more information about what specifically the constraints are. And much more, but I'll pause there.
Thank you. And for members of the public, Representative Chen did alert us that he is stuck in transit, as many can relate to over the last few days, and that's why he's off camera, just FYI. Next up, Representative Sutter.
Thanks, President Parker. So I have been in transit for much of the past 24 hours and checked in with Councilmember Allen today. So this is a list of what he and I have collectively heard from constituents. One is issues around when families will be notified about how DCPS staffing shortages might affect closures. I think that nicely echoes what Representative Thompson wrote about in her recent op-ed, having some sort of predictability and clear notification timeline for families about when decisions will be made. COVID leave, understanding that our staff at DC Public Schools are not all DC residents and are affected by the various neighboring systems approaches to COVID right now. So teachers who have children in Prince George's County who are learning virtually are now also stuck with complicated questions around childcare, as well as their own need to care for family members who may be testing COVID positive or for themselves. And there seems to be no willingness to extend COVID leave on that front. Regular rapid testing, so going along with what Representative Chang said, making sure that the asymptomatic testing isn't just the pooled sample testing, but that we continue this use of rapid tests as one of the measures to keep our kids in school. And then two other things, communication and implementation between DC Public Schools headquarters and school sites. DCPS said really clearly, go to any school to pick up your test. But I had outreach from a number of constituents who tried to go to schools that were near them and found that they could not get a test because their child was not registered at that school. So, these are challenges we've seen in lots of ways, but I think they're ongoing, that communication from what the policy is to how schools are implementing it isn't always 100%. And then finally, WMATA impacts. WMATA is reducing bus routes because of their own COVID leave situations with employees. How will that impact our students' ability to get to school, and how will that impact attendance and how we're handling that? So that's what I've been hearing. That said, families in Ward 6 really do think in-person learning is what they'd like to see happening. I've heard from a few residents who are concerned about going back, but the vast majority of contacts I've had from Ward 6 are, we need to stay in person as much as possible.
Thank you. Vice President Gazoo, I'm going to put you second to last, if that's okay. And then I'm going to move to Representative Bernstein.
Yeah, I'll try and keep this brief. I had two main concerns. The first is one that I've heard echoed by a lot of my peers, is concerns about students who face food insecurity during virtual learning, being able to access food regularly, especially students who are on free and reduced lunch, who normally get food from the school. Another concern is the ability to opt out of tests, which I feel is very dangerous, because schools that do regularly test but still have students who opt out, it could skew the data and because it takes a while for COVID to show up on tests, if students have been exposed by a student who opts out, it will take us longer to know. And then I guess I have one final thing, and that's like, I'm still nervous about the amount of students in DC schools who are eligible for the vaccine but are unvaccinated. And I wish that I saw more like in science classes about the vaccine, because that's what I found most effective in the past. And I think that would be a little bit more helpful if there were like designated times in class to learn about the vaccination. That's my time.
Thank you. That is great. I failed to mention earlier that Ms. Bernstein is a junior at Capital City Charter School. So again, we're thrilled to have you. Next, we will hear from Representative Lopez.
Good evening, everyone. So I really just had one main concern, which is on communication, because, so to be completely honest, my family and I tested negative for COVID, but the rest of my family had tested positive. And this was like the 3-day week that we had to go back. So there was a lot of, my parents didn't know what to do. So I had to do a lot of outreach of, you know, can I go back? When can I go back? What's going to happen? And so on. But because I'm a close contact, I could not go back. I had to reach out to my science teacher, and he didn't know what to do either. So there's a lot of miscommunication happening between the administrators and the teachers of what's supposed to happen to students who, you know, like what is the quarantine guidelines? When can you go back? And I was told to go back on Tuesday, and I get to school and they tell me to come back home. And I was told by the principal that I could come in, but there was a lot of things that apparently happened behind the scenes, and I wasn't supposed to go back that day. So I think there needs to be more communication, not only with the students, but with the parents as well, because I also had to have like a very serious conversation with my parents on what had to happen, that I was not supposed to go back to school. And I think sometimes there may be students who may need some help on easing into that conversation with their parents, because there may be conflicting areas of belief in some way. So I think just the 2 main points, more communication between students, staff, and parents.
That's a really, really important point. I appreciate you lifting that up, Representative. Next, Representative Wattenberg.
Hi, I am sick myself, so my voice is very low and I may cough, but I'll do my best here. First of all, I agree with really everything that was said here in terms of the different problems that we're facing. And I just want to acknowledge what I think all of us are feeling, which is we've said these things for, 2 years now, and it's very difficult not to be able to have any influence over it. And I guess one thing is for our governance committee, this is something we should talk about. How can we have some influence on this? What kinds of things can we do even? Or maybe that's for the advocacy committee. A few examples that go with some of what people have already talked about on the need for the reliable, the regular testing and the reliable reporting. I've heard from multiple people who will say things like, my child, I know of 4 of their friends who have COVID that are in their classes, and we have gotten no notice from our school of any, or we've gotten a notice of 1 of them. The reality in the reporting isn't matching, and it's really dissolving whatever trust is left, and that's a huge problem. The lack of the COVID coordinators has been mentioned, and the principals are doing everything. The principals have to approve, as I understand, they have to approve somebody reporting a COVID thing, then it has to go to downtown, and then it has to come back, and the principal has to, communicate it back out. This is crazy town. We can't have that. I've heard of some places where the HVAC is still not working. I want to raise one sort of broader issue is we have this very absolutist system with the mayor saying everybody has to be in school. We have to be in school. We have to be in school. And believe me, I know a lot of people who totally want to stay in school. Here's what I think is this cannot be a one size fits all operation, because we have kids, and we've talked about them here, who desperately need to stay home. Their parents desperately want them to stay home. There's immune compromised people at home. But we also have people I'm sorry, am I out of time?
You are out of time.
I'm sorry, my time thing isn't working, I guess. Let me just say this, that there are also people who desperately want their children in school. Either the children are suffering from depression or the parents are, there's work issues. And somehow we need a way to do both of these. And I think that's sort of a challenge here that nobody has dealt with.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Good evening. I am not completely sure how, like, I guess what I would propose. I think generally what has been helpful is when we've been able to hear from the student advisory committee members and when I think their engagement has been and elevation of issues has been particularly helpful throughout the pandemic. Especially as I'm sure this will be mentioned as Representative Sullivan's transition and his accolades happen later this meeting. I want to just note that as a possible place that we can use within our purview just to stay grounded in the realities of what's happening. I personally don't really believe in magical thinking. I don't consider myself an optimist or a pessimist. I think of myself as very much a pragmatist, which is why for me, I've heard what some people want. And I think people have different wants and we're never going to find a solution that matches what everyone wants. I think that effort, honestly, is an act in the navigation of the art of politics as opposed to the science of public health, which is one of the reasons that when the mayor made her announcement, I kind of went back to saying like, well, what are the metrics? Not because I'm advocating necessarily for or against closure, it's because we need a way to keep people safe in both regards, and we need a way to provide in-person instruction. So we need to, I've been fielding calls from families for weeks about getting notified, when are schools going to close, are we going to stay open? And the answer is I can't answer them because we don't have something clear, transparent, and public, which tells us when it's safe and when it's not, which is a need, not a want.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Johnson.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, I just would like to say Happy New Year. We have started this new year off to a rocky start, notably due to everything that has been going on. My school has also returned to virtual until Monday and are passing out the take-home testing kits, but many questions still float amiss and many questions still remain unanswered. And most of the questions that my peers have regarded to me is, what's next? Are we totally equipped to return back to virtual? Are we totally equipped to return to in-person? These are just several questions that we don't really know the true answers to. Students are questioning the functionality of virtual learning. I have at least 10 peers that have tested positive for COVID currently. So we are all scared. We are all unafraid. And I think the biggest thing for me, as well as like how my peers have mentioned before, is effective communication. We want to know what's next. We want to hear from our schools. We want to hear what's clear. We want to have our concerns addressed and to feel safe when we approach back into the building. And so I think for me, the biggest concern with my peers is just like, some of them are even feeling like it's a rush process in all transparency. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I just wanted to note and raise highlights to the communication efforts and just how like unshaky and rocky things really are right now.
Here. Really appreciate that, Representative. Vice President Gazoo.
Thank you. And I'm going to try not to repeat whatever I heard that I, have heard from constituents, but has already been mentioned. So sorry if I do. you'll know that I wasn't listening at that moment. No, just kidding. But I think some of the things, I also was in touch with my Councilmember Nadeau, and some of the things she has flagged and that I have also heard is a push for 100% testing, at least through January. And that is, I will say, what my daughter's school is doing weekly anyway, and it has been very effective. And she goes to Yuying Charter School. I realize that it's a heavier lift for a whole LEA like DCPS, but if we could do it for the next 3 weeks, I think that would make a big difference in being able to detect cases. Also, I don't know if this was already mentioned, but this seems very doable, which is to provide the whole school community with KN95 masks, not just staff and teachers. And then I think Representative OLeary mentioned burden on staff, but this is just something that has not been clear in communication from DCPS around, who is actually going to be managing the process of return. Is it going to be completely on schools? Are they being provided with any additional assistance from central office or otherwise? And so that is a real concern. And also just how is it going to work? I think there's a lot of anxiety and concern around that. With my last seconds, I'll just say that I did receive notice from Georgetown University that they are going virtual to the end of the month. And they had very clear criteria for why, and I can share that with you. I know my time is up, so I'll stop there, but I have an idea, or Councilmember White has introduced legislation and has mentioned that the state board could, if we wanted to, write a letter of support to reintroduce that. So more later.
Thank you. I will be brief just so we can get to Asi. There are three things. One, I would share from Ward 5 parents, I'm hearing resounding that they want their students in school. That said, I agree wholeheartedly that wanting kids in school is one thing, making sure kids are safe in school buildings as a whole another. And I agree that we need to be much clearer with the metrics. Secondly, I've heard from now 3 principals, notably in DCPS, who are feeling stretched, overwhelmed by the many logistics that are falling on their shoulders, the absence of those coordinators, and just the day-to-day of contact tracing. I've heard that phrase repeatedly. Contact tracing is now taking over their day-to-day jobs, where some are spending up to half of their time in school buildings just trying to track COVID cases, and it's not leaving them much time to do much else. And then thirdly, going back to my original point around students in school buildings, it is not lost on me with staffing shortages, what I'm hearing from principals, substitutes in crisis, that what we're often missing is the quality of learning that's happening in these school buildings. And so while we keep saying we want kids in schools, I have serious concerns around the quality of learning that's happening in our schools. And so just really want to, and I plan to elevate this with Asi, just to get clear around like, how are we managing, tracking, how student learning is going forward in these schools, especially where we are having severe staffing shortages, versus just simply wanting kids in buildings for the sake of having them in buildings. So those are the 3 things I will elevate. Again, members, we'll follow up offline around how we're going to follow up on these notes. We really appreciate it. Some of it will be transferred to Asi directly, and other things may be acts of advocacy, whether that's writing letters or engaging with council or community members. But again, we'll follow up offline about that. And so,
can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So Representative Gazoo mentioned that Councilmember White reached out about a letter of support to reintroduce the emergency legislation that he circulated. So I largely, and as I understand, I'll speak for myself. I largely believe many of the things he proposed are common sense. As I understand it, though, he did miss the deadline for circulation. I don't know why that would prohibit him from reintroducing. Is there something that about the process that I don't understand? Because it kind of implies that he needs support to reintroduce as opposed to just being able to reintroduce. So like, I'm not, yeah.
I'm gonna suggest we take that offline. I would say that has not been a formal request. In other words, I did not receive that request. So I'm going to say that was not a formal request of the State Board of Education, but we can take that offline and just talk about what, if anything, we can do to support, or should we, for that matter.
Nobody knows based on the process. Like, because my understanding of the process is he can just reintroduce because
we are, according to our understanding of the rules, that is accurate.
Okay.
We are meeting with Chairman Mendelson tomorrow, and maybe we'll gain some clarity around that. But again, it's a question of do we want as a board to get involved? I too agree that many of the things included in that emergency legislation were common sense, but it's a question of process as I understand it. So more to come on that. Just given the sake of time, and we are almost right on time. So welcome to our colleagues at OSSE. We are really excited to have you. I see Mr. Tooley, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Kramer, and they are coming to share information about updates to the school report card website. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Ms. Johnson. And should you not be the first one up, feel free to kick it to your colleague.
Don, I think you're on mute if you're talking.
Thanks. So I'll just say all of that all over again. Thank you, President Parker. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It happens to the best of us.
I was actively trying to go ahead and get the PowerPoint up and then hopefully activate the slideshow. There we go. And hopefully all of you are now seeing the slideshow. Is that correct? Wonderful. So I'm going to just give a quick overview of the purpose of today's presentation and what our agenda will look like. So I'm going to go over the DC School Report Card that we published on December 1st for 2021. As you may recall, I gave a quick overview of this at your October working session. And I'm going to go through step by step of the different domains that you'll be able to see. Hopefully you've already spent some time exploring the website and viewing the information that's available. And then we're going to transition into a live walkthrough of the website and take any questions and thoughts and feedback that you may have on the website. Does that sound good?
That works.
Wonderful. So I'm going to do a quick little recap for everyone just to refresh. And I know we have some people that are here on the board that were not here in October. So just a quick update on the requirements of the publication of a report card. As most of you are aware, this is one of the requirements of the federal Every Student Succeeds Act. And those were outlined in 2018, included all of the report card elements that were approved by the state board back in February of 2018, and also includes all of the components within that federal statute. We had published an original report card in December of 2018 for the very first time, and you see a picture of it here. In order to update this year, we put a big banner across the top. You'll notice that while the historic site is available, it is truly a historic site. So it hosts just historic information, and there is a big yellow banner at the top that directs you to the 2021 website. We built on a lot of the information that was used to build that original site, but as we'll see as we go over a couple of the information, we needed to address what was required, but also address the challenges that the 2020-2021 school year presented in terms of the data available, as well as the the way in which data should be reported responsibly. Fraser, I see that you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question now, or did you want to?
No, I'm sorry. That was for last time.
Oh, thank you so much. So a quick recap of the things that are required. Even though we had a waiver for many of the accountability components from US Department of Education for the 2020-21 school year, we still were required to publish our state report card with all of the available components. That was not something that was waived as a part of the assessment or the accountability waiver. And so in publishing those available metrics, we were required to publish those metrics in a user-friendly platform that's accessible to the public, as well as publish all of the student group information, just as we have historically done. We also had one component that did not impact us as much as it may have other states. There was a request in the addendum that states that received an accountability waiver were asked to report chronic absenteeism data, as well as information about technology access and availability to the extent that that data was available. Now, all states report chronic absenteeism to the federal government anyway, so that's obviously available from every state, but not every state previously reported it. We reported chronic absenteeism on our report card in a manner that we referred to as 90% attendance. So for us, reporting chronic absenteeism was not a challenge. And we also had available technology access and availability surveys that were done throughout the district early in the 2020-21 school year, which we added to the report card to align with the requirements of the waiver. As you are all aware, last year and much of this year have been very challenging school years. We know that not all of the data was possible to be collected. We did not have assessment data at all to collect or calculate, and updating our historic report card metric was limited because of the data that was available. And we also noticed that there were a lot of differences between both the way in which data was collected, the way in which data was classified, the environment in which students were learning, and other conditions that would render some of those metrics not comparable to prior years, thus making it an irresponsible data use to place them side by side in a historic chart. And we wanted to be responsible data stewards and make sure that we were not setting people up to use data irresponsibly. So one of the things that we decided to do was think about how we could present this data in a responsible manner while also providing transparency and access to the data, as well as meeting our requirements. And so one of the things that we took a look at was what were the flexibilities in our historic site. And we did not have the flexibilities within that site because of some of the platform limitations on which it was built. And so what we did was we really jumped to it and quickly built a brand new website. And that's what we launched in December. And this is what we're considering a short-term solution. It will work for us this year as well as into next year until we can build a much more robust site that will align with additional changes and revisions and things that we anticipate coming in the future. So this is similar to what we talked about in October. The only difference here is we had given you some graphic mock-ups back in October, and now here we are showing you versions of the actual website itself. So as you notice, the landing page looks quite different from the historic site. The historic site took you to a blue box that asks you to either click and go into a map of the schools or to type in the name of a school and find a school's website. And then down in the lower right-hand corner in the old site was a link to the DC overall report card. One of the things that we heard from a lot of users was they really wanted to see some of that DC data up front. And so in building this new website for this year, we went ahead and loaded and took that feedback that we had heard over time in building that while not changing the constructs of what was approved and required to be reported, just really changing how it's accessed and how it's presented. So you'll see that you have the different domains available, and you'll see for school enrollment, attendance, you'll see a school environment domain that has a couple of different paths that you can go down. The same is true with academic performance. There's a brand new area called learning environment, and that talks about the environment in which students learned, the percentage of time that they were learning in person, the types of hybrid models that were being used. And that was unique last year. And we thought presenting that information at a state level would be meaningful and useful to people. And then you'll also see that final container is where we have the school profile and data snapshots, as well as the access to our public data files and the reports that we've historically published as well. And then on the bottom part, you'll see there's an opportunity for us to give alerts, such as alerts about vaccination clinics or testing sites, things of that sort that we can change more rapidly, as well as the user resources that are available in the lower right-hand corner, just as they were before. Much of the look and feel is going to be the same and should be familiar to users who were used to using the historic site. You'll see that there are school level pages that have a very common look and feel. We utilized a lot of the language and terminology that we gathered through a robust set of stakeholder engagement, both with the board's task force, as well as with a variety of other public and community feedback loops that we did back in 2017-18 in building that website. And so you'll see that a number of those language remain the same. And it's something that people are used to and familiar with, as well as the look and feel of where things are located. Some of the things that are different, we created a new user guide to help people understand how to access the site. And apologies for that. And then we also focused with a look into statewide data. And we tried to make the visualizations a bit more interactive. And so you'll notice as we walk through the site, you'll be able to click on different filters and see some of the data, some of the statewide data by grade span, by student group, and a variety of other views. And then we also, as I mentioned before, created something that was unique for the pandemic, such as the learning environment that talked about the environments in which students learned. So a quick overview now of the individual domains that are available. I'll start just going through the domains as they're shown on the homepage. And I'll go quickly through that, and then we'll do a walkthrough of the site itself. In the enrollment domain, you're able to see both audited and ever enrolled. We've had a discussion before about the two different types of enrollment that are important to our schools. And it's those students that are enrolled at the enrollment audit count date, as well as those that are enrolled throughout the school year, which we refer to as ever enrolled. And so you're able to see those side by side, as well as all of the student group information, whether it's race, ethnicity, at-risk, students with disabilities. You're able to sort this information by ward of school as well, which is something that our previous site didn't allow you to do. On the attendance domain, we've put a lot of information at the very beginning to provide links and access to information that people may be interested in learning about. So we have a link to the attendance report. So people want to learn more about the analysis of attendance in DC. We have a link to the attendance report. We also put a link to the attendance policy, which you are very familiar with, as well as the continuing education plans from last school year. Not this school year's continuing education plans, but last year's, because that's what is it. Those are the plans in where schools and LEAs identified how they were identifying in-person learning, attendance during synchronous and asynchronous days, and those were outlined in their continuous education plans. You'll see that these are simple bar graphs similar to what we had on our historic report card. But one of the unique things here is that we have filters that are available, and you can filter by school level, whether it's elementary school, middle school, high school, alternative school, or even some of our adult schools are included in our all schools. You'll see chronic absenteeism as well as in-seat attendance. And then we also calculate pre-K in-seat attendance separately, just like we did on the historic report card site. Under school environment, we have two different tabs here. The first on the first page will lead you to the school environment, which shows your school leader and teacher metrics. These are exactly the same metrics that have historically been reported. Nothing new or different was added here. It's all of the same information. So you have school leader and teacher leader counts, as well as school leader and teacher experience, and then teacher qualifications, which are certified and in-field status. Under school environment, we also have a second tab, which talks about school enrollment changes. And there we're looking at within school year mobility. So those are entries and exits throughout the school year, and then re-enrollment. Re-enrollment does allow you to look at the filters for re-enrollment, much like you would have previously in the report card where you're able to see that in the way in which it used to be used in the STAR framework. Obviously, we don't have STAR framework scores this year, but we broke it down so that you could see re-enrollment at the elementary, middle, high school, as well as alternative school level. And then academic performance. On the academic performance page this year, it is pretty much all high school data. That's the academic data that we had available statewide. We have graduation 4 and 5 year, as well as secondary completion for our alternative schools. We also show college enrollment for the class of 2019 and 20. And then under college and career readiness metrics, we have the SAT metrics, as well as the APIB participation and the APIB performance. Those are all available by student group as well as individual overall rates. And then for graduation, you will see trend data. It's one of 2 metrics on the report card where we have trend data side by side. Learning environment, as we talked about, was a new display this year to be responsive of the information that we were able to display due to the pandemic. You're able to see the percentage of students in-person learning. Then you're also able to scroll down and see the types of hybrid learning environments, whether it was 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week. This is only displayed at the state level, and you were able to disaggregate this and look at how it changed month by month across the school year. You're also able to click on grade spans, and you can click on multiple grade spans at a time and look at how that changed throughout the year. And then school snapshots, which is, we know a lot of people go to the DC school report card, not just to look at state level data, but also to look at school level data. And when you click on the school level snapshots, you'll see that you see a list of all of the available schools, and you can click on that snapshot in English or in Spanish. And recognize that, remember, we said this is a temporary website. So this is something where we're using to transition over, recognizing the challenges we had with our historic site. And so we did create what we're looking at as our snapshots and providing the information, all of the school profile information, and then the individual data metrics are available from a click. And then you can scroll through, you can see those on your computer, on your phone, or any device that you might use. You also can print them out and have an accessible PDF. And then, of course, we have our public data files, which are available, and we produce the Excel files for all of the metrics that are available on the report card. And then we have different supporting resources. We're in the process of updating our FAQ information now to try and make sure that we're leading with the questions that are most relevant to the 2021 report card data, and removing any of those questions that are not really pertinent based on the data that's available right now. So a little bit about the website analytics. I know that's something that historically y'all have been very interested in learning about. And right now we know that we've not done a lot of promotion of the website. So we didn't have a campaign kicking it off. And there are a lot of things going on in the time period since we've launched the site on the 1st of December. So in just about a month's time, we have just over 2,000 users of the site itself, and 1,600 of those are unique users. So that means that we've got quite a few people that are coming back time and time again. And then I've listed here by page the number of users and site visits that we've had, as well as the unique site visits for each one of those pages, and the time that people are spending on those pages. One of the things that might be of interest to you is that we're seeing that people are spending about just over 11 minutes on the school snapshots page, which really indicates that they're most likely going through and reviewing multiple schools at a time. We don't have the ability to pull the unique hits for the school snapshots because those are actually downloaded as PDFs onto a computer screen, and Google Analytics doesn't track all of those downloads, but we are able to see the number of times that people come to that site, and then also how long they spend on that site. You also may notice that we have a lot of people that are going to the data and reports page, meaning that they're either looking at some of the data files there or the technical guide or some of the other resources there. So it's nice to see that a lot of those tools are being utilized by the community. So in the next steps that we will be updating the school snapshots. We have some LEAs that have reached out and indicated that they've made some changes to their school since they certified this information back in August about their school. whether it be their parent organization contact or some of the extracurriculars that are available at their school or before or after care. In some cases, it might even be a principal that has changed since then. And so our LEAs are in the process of updating those, and they'll have all of those updated and submitted to OSSI by next week. And then we will update those school snapshots by the end of January. And then we are continuing to review the usage. We will have a couple surveys that will come up on the report card site to gather feedback from users on the look and feel of the new display and design, and gather some information that will inform our efforts for some continuous improvement and development of the site. And then we will continue to build out the domain as well as the functionality of the report card site so we can add in the school per pupil expenditure data in the spring, which is something that is also still required under ESSA. And we update that information in the spring. Okay. I am going to stop that right now. Hopefully. Okay. And then we're going to go to a look at the website itself.
I have a couple of questions.
Okay, did you want to wait until we did a walkthrough of the website, Dr. OLeary, or did you want to ask them
No,
now?
it really has to do with what you just went over.
Okay.
The first question is, was there any correlation, or did y'all do any kind of correlation of daily absences versus the grades of students? Because what I was hearing last year a lot is that students were there online, but they weren't doing any work. And I just wondered if there was any kind of a correlation between actual attendance and the grades that the students made.
So you're speaking about course level grades, and OSSI does not actually receive course level grades from schools and LEAs. So we publish our attendance report, which talks and looks at some of the data and the information that we have that we collect from all of our schools, but we don't receive course level grades. And so that's something that the schools themselves would be able to do with the data. And so they're able to look at their data, but we don't actually have their course. We don't have course grades.
Why is that?
I know that course level information is something that is in the process of being collected, but grades are more of an LEA specific role, not necessarily the state education agency's role in terms of managing course level grades. Those are things that are LEA specific roles and responsibilities, and not really the role of an SEA.
Okay, because I understood that a lot of students could sign on to a class if the class was over 10 o'clock. If they got there at 9:58, they were considered as present.
That would be
and that's still going on.
So in terms of synchronous or asynchronous learning, each LEA established a policy for how they would calculate and collect information and report someone. The LEA itself identifies the attendance of the student and reports it to OSSI on a daily basis. We don't set the criteria for the asynchronous and synchronous learning. We set an attendance policy. We provide it to the LEAs, and then they include how they are aligning to that policy and their continuous education plan.
And one more question is, if the virus doesn't go away, will OSSI be trying to submit a waiver again?
So in terms of a waiver, and you may be aware that U.S. Department of Education released an FAQ document just before the Christmas break, as well as a draft of an accountability addendum flexibility. We have a webinar tomorrow, which will learn more information about that. And we're continuing to explore what flexibilities are available. And we look forward to learning a lot more about that and engaging with you very shortly.
Thank you. And everyone, please apologize for this. That's a great answer. They understand what I mean.
Thank you, Representative. Members, let's hold questions to the end of the presentation. And Ms. Johnson, you were going to show us a visual of the website.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Oh, no worries.
Okay, hopefully everyone is now seeing the website. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Representative Thompson. So this is our DC School Report Card website, and you will see very similar to the graphic that I shared with you. We have the link to the user guide in the very beginning. There is a brief narrative that talks about where the requirements were, outlines the information. You will notice that this website is available in English as well as available in Spanish. And we have done just the 2 languages this year. We know that those were the 2 languages that were most frequently used on our resources. We look forward to future iterations of the report card being able to have more languages. As you may recall, our historic website itself also was available in English and Spanish. And so we have replicated that with this new website. You'll see that you can access school enrollment, attendance, school environment, academic performance. For example, if we click into the attendance, one of the things that I talked about at the very beginning was that we provided some robust information in the opening paragraph to provide resources and links to the user to provide additional information about attendance from this past school year. You'll see that we provided a link to the attendance policy, as well as a link to the continuous education plans, where the LEAs outline their attendance procedures. That'll take you to a link, and you can look at any of those plans and see how they determine to identify whether students were present in synchronous learning, asynchronous learning, how they identified that. And then you can also confirm what the policy was for attendance as well. The link to the attendance report, which we produce annually, is there at the very beginning. We start with an overview of chronic absenteeism. We mentioned here that we have some customized filters. So you'll notice that you can look at overall across the state, and this provides you an information of state level data. So across all of DC, you're able to see elementary schools. You're able to disaggregate that into middle schools, high schools, alternative schools. And as we scroll down into all schools, when we get into in-seat attendance, you'll notice that in in-seat attendance, adult schools are included in the all schools, and then you can disaggregate to see elementary, middle, high schools, and alternative schools. You'll also be able to see, so if we looked at elementary schools here, we can see the ISA rate, which is the in-seat attendance rate. And with last year having in-seat attendance that was taken both in person as well as distance learning or remote learning, we disaggregated that so that you're able to see that and see what the attendance rate looked like for some of those. We did put a quick caveat there, is that because different schools had different policies in terms of attendance, we do caution people in terms of making judgments as to whether or not students were more likely to be present in person versus virtual, because some schools actually had policies in which if a student was scheduled to attend in person, but for some reason was not able to attend in person and attended virtually, then they switched that schedule for that student to be a virtual learning day. So they weren't absent in person, they were simply present virtual. And so what you will see is a much higher rate in some cases for in-person learning in person, for ISA in person, than you might for distance learning. So a quick caveat when you're looking at the data, not to make any rush to judgments there because of the policy considerations. And then you're able to see this for race, ethnicity, as well as all of the different student groups that we present on our report card. And I mentioned before around taking a look at learning environment. And so learning environment, we know, was brand new. It was really thinking about how our students learned And we were really concerned about being able to look at this from a state level lens. So this is not something that we ran or calculated at the school level. We also know that because of the size of some of our schools and our grade spans, we would have we'd have a lot of suppression concerns in terms of end sizes being small and populations being small. So looking at it at the state level gave us the ability to actually look at some greater slices of this data. Refresh that really quickly. So one of the things that you will notice as you use the website, we did build it using some in-house tools. And so when you call up this website, it's actually calling up this data and generating that graphic on demand. So it may take a little bit more time than what you may have historically found, but we found that the graphics are loading between 5 and 10 seconds per page. And so it's just a quick little delay sometimes. And you'll notice here that in the learning environment, we can look at, this is across all of DC and looking at throughout the entire year. Now, if I wanted to take a look at January of last year, I could say in January of last year, this is where our students were learning. And as we know, nearly all of our students last January were learning in person, or learning virtually rather. And as we started to transition into March, we saw more students moving into the classroom. And if we start taking a look at different grade spans, we're able to see that we know that a number of our schools were focused on getting our youngest learners back into the classroom. So if I look at the K2 environment, I can look at that in March. I can see how it changed in April. I can see how it changed in May. And then as I scroll down with those filters still on, I'm able to see the different learning environments. And so here we're looking at the month of May for the K-2 grade span. And here I'm able to see schools that were located in wards 1, 2, 3, and you can see all of those. And you'll see that the students in grades K2 attending schools in that ward, you can see how they were learning. And so, for example, in ward 3, in May of last year, we had 44.6% of the K2 students attending schools in ward 3 were learning in person 4 days a week. So this is a site that you can, look around, you can use the different filters. You can actually click on multiple grade spans here if you wanted to. And you can look at that information. As we know, that's information that is unique to last year. It's not something that we had before. Simply clicking on the report card icon here in the upper corner will take you back to the home page. There's also a link at the bottom of the page that would take you back there. And then you could go and you could take a look at any of the school level snapshots. And these are located in alphabetical order by LEA. So for example, if you wanted to take a look, Dr. OLeary, at Cardozo, you can see the school snapshot here. And it should look very familiar to the same way in which the school snapshot was previously displayed. You'll see a picture of the school. We put the message from the school at the very top. That's the unique message that's crafted by the school. And that's the first thing that the users will read is that message from the school. See the basic logistic information, school instructional hours, some information about the school, the population, the enrollment, transportation, much of the same information that you've seen before, just laid out slightly differently. And then you're able to see the metrics as you keep scrolling down. You're able to see the ever enrolled information. Ever enrolled is the enrollment data that we have historically put on the report card as well. Adding the audit information at the state level was something new that we added this past year. And then you'll see the teacher data. You'll see attendance data, both in-seat attendance and chronic absenteeism. And then you'll see the within year mobility, re-enrollment. You'll see that we're able to show both the school level as well as a comparison to the graphic of what the DC overall rate is for each one of these metrics, since you're able to see the SAT data, the AP-IB, and then last but not least, you'll see the graduation data 4 and 5 year, and then the college enrollment rates. And you'll see that for every high school, whether they are traditional DCPS schools or public charter schools. You'll see that information, all of the same information shared in the same manner.
Excuse me, Ms. Johnson.
Yes.
Just quick time check. How much more do you have to share? Not to rush you.
That is it. I am done.
Awesome. I just wanted to make sure we had time to have for members to ask questions should they have any.
Yes, all done. Wanted to give you that quick walkthrough. I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
No, that was a very thorough walkthrough, and it was really helpful. So thank you for that. Members, are there questions? And if you have questions, I'm going to ask for the sake of time to try to keep it under a minute. Representative Reed.
Hi, thank you. Quick question, and that is, I know, Ms. Johnson, thank you so much for the comparative information about clicks, because I am very much interested in that. The question I have is, do we see any differences, with my school, not my school DC, the what was it? The fair,
the EdFest.
EdFest, yes. With EdFest being online, usually it's when you see a spike in information for clicks on the My School DC website. I'm just curious if you've noticed any trends, or if you're all even thinking about maybe doing a snapshot of like from EdFest or maybe not last year's not a good one, EdFest pre-COVID, maybe now, and just to see like, are there any comparisons? Are people still using the same way, or is there any impact with the new formatting? So, but thank you for that click information, and happy to hear.
Yeah, as you saw, we are continuing to review the analytics on the website, and the usage of the site is a bit lower than what we saw 2 years ago. And it's a bit comparable to what we saw last year, quite frankly. And so we saw a bit of an uptick when we first released the report card. So we saw more people going and using it on December 1st than we saw on the initial launch date of the report card last year. So people were a little bit more interested in seeing this new platform. I think they've spent a bit more time on the site. We're able to see more with the analytics on this site than we were a little bit with the older site, and be able to see the paths that people are traveling through. So that's been a bit more helpful, but I'm not sure in terms of the comparison to the My School DC traffic. I would have to check with them because they are separate websites and they have separate analytics. I do know that we get references to our site from the My School DC. So we created links on every My School DC profile. We linked the school snapshot. And so there's also a link on the My School DC page that takes you directly to the new 2021 DC school report card. And so while we can't collect the data to the direct school snapshot PDFs, we are able to see the number of times that people come to the report card site from My School DC. That is our second highest referral.
Thank you for that. Representative Thompson.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm curious, I really appreciated you including school climate in the dashboard and raising some of the challenges around having that, presenting that as a measure. I'd be curious if there was any more information or like a double click you can do on like, what we're seeing this year and any changes that might be for next year.
In terms of the metrics that are available this year compared to those that will be available next year, as soon as we're able to more clearly identify that will be something that will be considered when we look at U.S. Department of Ed's accountability flexibility. And so we will be engaging with you and sharing that information. We need to get a little bit more clarity on the guidance and the FAQs that they recently released. And then we'll walk through what some of those limitations are. We also are kind of in a posture where we're waiting to see what is available and what is comparable. And so we have to remain a bit flexible around that right now, but it's something that we will engage back when we have more information. Definitely something I have on my radar, and I know that the front office does as well.
Awesome. Representative Sutter.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that really thorough walkthrough. I really appreciate that some of the things the board has asked about are on this new iteration of the report card. So the teacher data that OSSI has already being displayed was great, as is the programs that are available at schools being right there on the front page of every site. We heard that loud and clear from constituents. They want to know what programs schools offer, and that's right there on the front. So that I appreciate that. My question is going to push a little bit on the ed flexibility and guidance, and specifically, I'm curious what OSSE is thinking about the timeline for when they will engage with parents and the public, because I know that's one of the things Ed has noted is required as the state considers any changes to the framework, whether it's the 1-year change or something more permanent, and then how the state board can be involved in it with OSSE in that process.
So I think there's two different processes that you're speaking about. One is the addendum flexibility. That is a simple 1-year flexibility for 2022. And as I said, I have a webinar with Ed about that tomorrow to get a little bit more clarification. In their document, it is due in March. And so that is a quick turnaround, which means that it is very similar to an addendum process that you may recall that we approached last year. And then we had published that, did public comment on that, and engaged and reviewed that with all of you. And then in early February, as soon as the new administration came in, they kind of shelved the addendum and put out a waiver process. And so that was kind of put off to the side. And so now we're revisiting what this addendum can look like for 2022. And as soon as we have more clarification, we'll engage with you on that. And I know that the board has been working and thinking through a lot of changes for the future iterations of both the STAR framework and the report card. I look forward to seeing some of those recommendations and considering those, and then engaging with all of you, hopefully in the near future on that. We kind of have to take things step by step right now. And so this first thing in front of us is going to be this accountability addendum waiver, and then we'll revisit what the timeline looks like for 2023 and beyond after that.
Okay, thank you. And just to clarify, you have the webinar tomorrow, and this addendum is going to be due to the department in March, so we can expect engagement between now and then.
That is their current timeline. If anything changes, then we'll be sure to let you know. But I anticipate that Justin and Dr. Grant will engage on what that timeline will look like with you when she has follow up with leadership coming up.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that, Ms. Johnson. And it seems suggested in your response, not to put you on the spot, that perhaps you're reflecting on recommendations from the state board being considered in next year's addendum, if there is one, to the U.S. Department of Ed, and not necessarily what might be submitted in March.
So to be clear, what would be submitted in March is a 1-year only addendum flexibility. It is not changes to the accountability framework that would be typically thought of as an amendment. So there are two different processes there. Recommendations that the board has been talking about would be things that would be a part of an amendment process, not a part of an addendum process. An addendum process is a very narrow scope, limited to very specific areas of flexibility that are time limited to 1 year, whereas an amendment actually changes your state plan from the point of implementation moving forward. And so that would not be able to be put in place until 2023 at the earliest.
I so appreciate clarity. Thank you. Just very clear, direct, succinct answers. Just quick follow-up, and then I'm going to go to the next member. So when might we expect that amendment timeline? So you talked about March being the addendum timeline. When is the deadline for the amendment?
So under the ESSA statute, there is not a deadline per se for an amendment. States can offer amendments at any point in time. The U.S. Department of Ed has guidance around when amendments are most favorably received in terms of being able to turn around an amendment and provide feedback to a state within 120 days. And thinking about what that looks like in terms of the school year, ideally, you want to make sure that schools are aware of how they are being measured, what they're being measured by, and what they're being held accountable for as close to the start of the school year as possible. You wouldn't want to introduce something like that in March and tell people that that's how they're being held accountable that year. So introducing something like that in March or February would not be ideal. And many LEAs would probably say not fair. And so in terms of thinking about what that looks like, you would want to introduce something in a manner that you would be able to have an answer back from US Ed so that it would be clear by September, so that schools would know how they were being measured. And so we kind of look backwards from that point. But a distinct deadline I can't give you right now because we do need to get that information tomorrow to clarify.
Understood. Super helpful. And members, I'll use that as my time with a question, and I'm going to go to you next, Representative Wattenberg.
Thanks. That was super clear around the deadlines, and also I liked everything I saw there. I had one question on the deadlines, which you've answered, and my other question is about the dynamic ability and the ability to the filters, I guess is how you talk about it. So if you go to a particular school and you click attendance, you can get broader information about attendance at that school, right? I think
so the filters are only at the state level, Representative Wattenberg.
Okay, that was okay. That was going to be my question. Okay, so that's the question.
The school level snapshots are static views of the graphic and the data. And that's why when you pull it up, it pulls up in a PDF manner. And so, as I stated at the beginning, keep in mind, this is something that we built within a matter of a few months so that we would be able to responsibly report the data from 2021. It doesn't have all
totally fair. Yeah.
We're working on it. We look forward to it in the future.
That's great. And then at the state level, that I know you can filter by a school, I think is what you said. But can you
school type?
By a school type, I see. So you couldn't take, I'm thinking about the families that are interested in school choice. So they couldn't like pick out 5 schools and say, here are 5 schools I'm interested in. Please tell me about attendance, or please tell me about early care or something. Correct? Not
in this iteration of the report card. That is something that we would like to see what's possible as we design a new website. Keep in mind, this is not something that we don't ship this out to somebody else and have them do that. One of the things that I am most proud of is the fact that we have always calculated all of our accountability metrics in-house. And while we've had a vendor that produced our report card site, it was really a platform that we sent all of our data into. They didn't actually calculate any of our data or do any of those aggregations. And that really gave us the most integrity to our data and made sure that we were in control of that data from the get-go.
No, I appreciate it. And I don't want to be I don't want my to be misunderstood at all. It was not meant as not enough. It was really just meant to understand as we all move forward. I think it's very impressive what you did very quickly, and I appreciate it. And I know lots of other people appreciate it.
The ability to have a customized compare feature is something that we heard with the historic site as well. And it's one of the things that we had listed as one of those desirables for a future iteration of the report card. And so that's still on a list of things to see if it's possible to have a customized compare feature.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Members, I'm not seeing any other questions. Last go. All right, Ms. Johnson and the OSSI team, thank you. This was really helpful. If we have questions, I'm going to ask that members share them via email with staff, and Ms. Johnson and team, we will share them in block with you if there are any follow-up questions. But very thorough explanation. And thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, we are moving on to our next agenda item, which is to discuss the numerous STAR framework recommendations and the clarification from Ms. Johnson. I would imagine will inform those discussions as well as our collective next steps. So this is what we're going to do in an effort to try to organize this. I'm going to give a very quick frame, less than 2 minutes. I'm going to go to Representative Wattenberg. I'm going to then go to Representative Patterson. And those are introductory, high-level explanations. You can share whatever you want as co-chairs of the committee that is responsible for the resolution that we're discussing. I also know there are 5 amendments. And we, in an effort to keep this as organized as possible, we're going to do 4-minute rounds, which is such a luxury of time. And in that 4 minutes, you have an opportunity to raise any questions, comments, concerns, that you may have on the resolution or any of the amendments, I would ask respectfully, you should feel free and empowered to direct questions to members, and their response will be considered as part of your 4 minutes. So, for example, if I were to ask Representative Patterson a question about a committee's recommendation, that my question and his response would count against my 4 minutes. So with that, I'm going to jump right in just so we can maximize our time. And so for members of the public, you will recall last year that the board took up the work of reviewing the STAR framework. Many would argue that the STAR framework is among the state board's most important piece of work related to our federal ESSA policy or legislation. And we concluded last year as a board that that our STAR framework as a city had inherent bias, namely because schools that had high levels or of students designated as at risk, for example, or students that were designated as having special learning needs, had lower ratings disproportionately across the city. We established earlier this year a committee to pursue and investigate what might be underneath that bias, as well as to explore potential recommendations to improve our STAR framework. The committee chairs were Representative Ruth Wattenberg of Ward 3 and Jock Patterson, our at-large member. And that committee consisted of also Representative Sutter from Ward 6 and Representative Reed from Ward 8. We had a number of conversations over the year, from panels to inviting researchers in, talking to parents to talking to students. Our student advisory committee weighed in. And there is a resolution that we're discussing tonight that comprises many months of work. And so I just want to underscore that there's going to be a lot of discussion, but I do want to just laud the work of this committee, as well as our co-chairs, Patterson and Wattenberg, for at least getting us to this point. The committee entertained 12 recommendations, and they reached consensus on 10 of those recommendations. The resolution that we have tonight includes those 10 recommendations, and there were 2 recommendations where there were tie votes. 2 members agreed with those recommendations, 2 members did not. As a board, we agreed to take up those recommendations as amendments. I'm going to do my best to characterize it, then I'm going to punt it to Representative Wattenberg and Patterson. And this is just to level set for the public for what they are going to hear us talk about. One of the non-consensus recommendations generally is around how to display our school rating information. And one way is to do that through a dashboard. The other recommendation is to do that through a summative rating. And when we say a summative rating, we're talking about the stars, which currently schools are rated on 1 to 5 stars. 5 for many people represents a quote unquote good school or a school that is doing well. And a 1 star represents for many people a school that needs work. That does not necessarily mean that's how OSSI characterizes it, but I think it's fair to say that is how the public interprets it. So those are the 2 non-consensus recommendations that you may hear discussion. Before I end, there are 2 additional recommendations, there are 3 additional amendments that are also going to be talked about. 2 of which come from discussion and debate that we heard at our last public meeting that were included. And then the last one was presented around dealing with Park as the assessment. As many of you all know, much of the debate around how to represent the data is a reaction to the assessments that students take. Park is our state summative assessment. And so there is one last amendment of the 5 that calls into question or recommends that OSSI explore alternative summative assessments. And so I probably did not do justice, but that is the resolution as well as the 5 amendments that we have. And I'm going to now turn it over to Representative Wattenberg for 2 minutes. And I'm going to ask respectfully that you honor the 2 minutes. Then I'm going to turn it over to Representative Patterson. And then members, I'm going to open it up for 4-minute rounds. And you can raise your hands and I'll call you as I see you. So Representative Patterson, I'm sorry, Representative Wattenberg.
Thanks. That was a good introduction. Thank you. So what you have before, so as President Parker said, we heard from people in December. What you have in front of you is a revised resolution post-December that includes efforts to reflect the views that were raised in December, and they're in two parts. Part of it is revised, is two amendments, as President Parker referred to, and the other is as a rationale. So that's what you had in front of you. People were then asked to make comments, and I got a lot of comments, and I have responded to the comments in turn. I have tried to incorporate the style and clarification comments as best as I could into a new draft, which I've shared with the committee and the officers. I think it's too confusing to put it out today. It's, like I say, it's mainly style and clarifications, and I think we want to focus on the substance. So that's out there. We got to figure out how to deal with that. The amendments are out there. I want to, I asked John Paul to send out one more amendment, which is, I wish I'd put it in the original draft as an amendment then, but I missed it. And it really is an effort to add some additional indicators into the priority, into what we call the priority issues, and then juggle a bit what's in the secondary. So take a look at that. And then in terms of the substantive comments that we got, I have 18 seconds, but I'll just say this, is one of the issues is how much prescription we should give to OSSI. Should we be prescribing to them exactly how to organize the formula for identifying 5% of the specific metrics? I don't think so, but it's a fair discussion. We can come back to that. That's my two.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Patterson.
Thank you for this time. First, I want to start off with just thanking the staff that worked so hard to make sure that we got out and we spoke to people. We had good information, presentations for people that we engaged. I really, truly appreciate the work, specifically Darren, who worked laborious on this and gave us a lot of time. What I will say is that what you have before you are 10 recommendations that were agreed upon and 2 that did not reach consensus. And for me personally, looking at the process, I appreciate the amendments that we're about to hear and how they will be framed and how people have come to those particular amendments. And I look forward to doing that and listening to them and voting on them. For me personally, I have stated from day one that I am a person that is for a summative rating. And that has not changed. I have stated that I'm against stars, and so we can talk about what that looks like. That I appreciate a dashboard which tells the full story and can also allow people to really truly understand where we need to hold people accountable for decision making. But I just want to make sure that people understand this is not an either or type of situation. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It can be both, and we can truly hold our decision makers accountable for what happens in our schools and the funding. So thank you.
For the whole 30 seconds to spare. Thank you. Members, again, raise your hand. We'll have 4-minute rounds. And I will reiterate, this is the beginning of our debate around this. So we don't have to hash everything out now, but at least we'll be able to put things on the table in our 4 minutes. And first up, I see Representative Thompson.
Sorry, I have a clarifying question more than a comment on any of this. So when you were framing the conversation, you said, used like different language. You said we had 5 amendments. I think I saw 3 amendments. And then, and maybe I'm mistaken, and then you said 2 recommendations. And then you said recommendations and like alternative recommendations. And you said amendments. And I'm not quite sure what I'm placing where. And so
that is very fair. So the committee had recommendations. There were 12 of them, 10 of which they all agreed on. Maybe there was some nuance in language that they could tweak, but generally the substance they agreed on. Our agreement as a board would be that the resolution would only include the agreed upon 10 recommendations. The draft that we received included 2 additional recommendations which was not what we had agreed. So what I shared with Representative Wattenberg and Patterson was that we were going to strike the 2 additional recommendations that were added to the resolution that came from feedback that we heard at our last public meeting, and we were going to vote them up or down as amendments. So that's 2 of them. Then
So I should consider everything not in the resolution as an amendment. It's
That's
not,
correct.
we should not be, for
That's
me,
correct.
for clarity's sake, I should not consider them alternative or as additional recommendations. They're amendments at this point.
They are amendments. You can vote for one of them, none of them, all of them.
Yes.
And the reason we did it that way is because the committee couldn't come to an
No,
agreement.
that makes sense. And I was actually some feedback I gave was like, okay, if either, we should have a tie-breaking vote or
Yes.
things should be added as amendments. Because if it comes from the committee, it comes from the committee. My confusion was literally just the using both language, because then I didn't know what the threshold was, like for different votes or if this. So
just
that
last
clarification was helpful.
level set. So the 2 non-consensus recommendations became 2 amendments. The 2 additional recommendations became 2 more amendments. And then the last amendment from Representative OLeary about park testing became the 5th one. So those are the 5 amendments. And I know 4 minutes will not do it justice, but for the sake of time, we were just trying to find a reasonable way to kind of tackle everything.
And can I just add, I think this was a little confusing, that there are 3 documents, but they contain together, those 3 documents have 5 amendments in them, if that makes sense.
Okay, let's go with it and see what comes up. Who wants to go? Representative Reed, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do know, okay, never mind. I do know that my understanding were that much of the committee's voting on the recommendations came from some of your work. So I'm not seeing hands, so I just want to see if you would be willing to kick us off in the discussion.
Sure, I'm happy to. So I will say I had to take quick notes so I can, where'd my Google Doc go? Frame what I was going to say. So my work was really much grounded in the survey data from specifically, like, I know we have 561 responses or whatnot, and I asked staff to provide me with what was the Ward 8 breakdown from parents? Because I wanted to see, there was some noise in the data that we had from surveys because it was a lot of parents who were 4 or 5-star schools and that kind of thing. So I was like, hey, I want to see what Ward 8 data was. And the reason why I wanted to see Ward 8 data is because we have 4 or 5 of schools who are currently in the bottom 5%, right? And that's been, even before bottom 5% was a thing, it's just always been that way. Talking to Ward 8 schools, specifically 2 schools that I know are in the bottom 5% during EdFest, actually popped in during their virtual session, just to give them a heads up that we were going through this process. They were like, we're not trying to, get away from what the information is, but we want fair indicators, and we want indicators that reflect our work and reflect what our students do. And again, we were talking about bias. It is very interesting that in all data, like, why do we get that many schools in that percentage? So my work was really trying to center myself on what am I hearing from constituents and frame even indicator information. I didn't shy away from, while it wasn't the #1 indicator, which was residents were pointing to, they wanted growth, school climate, school safety. Somewhere down the line, proficiency did appear. So I'm not trying to shy away from that either. So that's kind of where you'll see the 10 recommendations that we came across. That's where really it was almost a selfish thing for Ward 8 to kind of focus and center work there. In regards to the 2, I guess, recommendations that were hanging out from the committee around the single summative rating or not, it was the majority of Ward 8 residents said no, thank you. While in data or survey data, it wasn't it was about maybe like less than 10%, so maybe 9% difference in regards to difference between should we have one, should we not have one. But when I went to actual Ward 8 groups, I'm talking about Anacostia Coordinating Council, Ward 8 Education Council, Congress Heights Civic Association, the folks who really knew about the STAR framework were like, no, thank you, we don't want it, blow that whole single summative piece up. Then, and I guess the other piece I was hanging out there was, again, the indicators. And I will say from the committee, with a minute and some seconds, the committee even, which was a chart that had, middle or elementary and middle school, high school, the committee agreed that like these are indicators that we're okay with. The split was on how to display those indicators. So it wasn't about content, it was about aesthetics that we kind of just ran out of debate time for. So I'll close there.
No, thank you. That is helpful. I am not wanting to cold call on people, but I am not, Representative Sutter.
I figured I would step up because I don't think it's that people don't want to discuss. So two quick thoughts. One, to Representative Reed's point about the disagreement over the indicators that should be used to identify the bottom 5% of schools. I don't actually think the disagreement was over aesthetics, as someone who disagreed. And so here's where I think the disagreement lies. One, the board has a really clear set of agreements that we do not think the current framework is an equitable way to evaluate our students and our schools. So we need to say what would be a more equitable way to evaluate our students and our schools. None of us are psychometricians, so I'm not suggesting we pretend to be, but I do think we need to give more clear, specific recommendations to the state education agency on what we think would be improvements in how we evaluate our students in our schools. So what we have in that non-consensus recommendation is a set of indicators, but we don't get into how much percentage weight we think a certain indicator should be increased over what it is now, how much a certain percentage weight indicator should be reduced over what it is now, or even like a relative comparison. So that was one point of disagreement that I had with that. The second point is that there's a piece about transparency of data, and Vice President Gazoo and I had the chance to speak earlier today about this. For me, just using a formula, so we'll use as an example. Let's say there's 230 schools in the district. I never get our number quite right, but I'm going to go with that. We're going to run all 230 schools through the current STAR framework, and then we show and display how all 230 of those schools turn out on the framework. And that's how we get the STAR ratings. The schools at the highest end of how they run through the framework are 5 stars. The schools at the lowest end are 1 star. And then we have the bottom 5% of schools, which are those 8 schools identified as comprehensive support number 1. Our recommendation seems to suggest we take a new formula, we run all 230 schools through it, but we only identify those bottom 8. We don't publicly share any of the other information on the 222 schools that have been run through that formula. To me, that's problematic. I think it's important that we are transparent with, if we use a formula to run all our schools through it, how can the public access that information? I think there is a lot of reasonable and nuanced discussion to happen on where should we share that information, and should it be prominently displayed in the form of a summative rating or not? But I think first I want to get clarity on, do we all agree that the transparency of information has to be shared with the public in some form or fashion? So that was my thought on that. With my minute that I have left, here's my 2 things that I think about this current iteration of the resolution. I do not think it is clear or specific enough for our purpose. I think we all agree that we need to do a better job with the framework of how we evaluate our schools. I don't think this resolution primarily focuses on that question, and I don't think it is clear or specific enough for the general public to read it and understand it. So I think we have more work to do to get to that point, and I think our board would be well served. All the wonderful work that Representative Wattenberg and Representative Patterson have put in to date notwithstanding, I still think we need to do more work before we are ready as a full board to share it with the public. The last thing is that I think, to me, the question of a summative rating is like the last question I want to answer. And I want to get everything right about how we're changing the form of evaluation before I care one way or not about a summative rating. If what we are doing in evaluating schools is not changed, then the summative rating isn't valid. Whether we have it or don't have it, to me is less important than what are we using to evaluate our schools. And I hope we spend our time there. So I'll end there with 2 seconds to spare.
Thank you, Representative. Vice President Gazoo.
Thank you. And again, thank you to the chairs and the committee for all of this tremendous work. You know, I do think that the purpose that is stated in the second whereas clause, you know, of understanding the quality of our schools and essentially targeting being able to target support is made clear in this resolution. And so I really appreciate that. And I do think that it also makes clear why we need to do that, you know, and that how important it is to address bias. And I think there is agreement on that on the board and with ASI as well. I think, you know, a place where I think we could improve is just having language that highlights the way that a dashboard really is a value add here. And I think ultimately what we're trying to get at is a more expansive and accurate view of our schools. And one that doesn't do that necessarily by comparing them, because in a lot of ways, for so many reasons, our schools, it's hard to compare them. They are very different from one another. And so I think the dashboard is a way of providing stakeholders with a more accurate and detailed view of what each school offers. And then I think rating some of the indicators is a way of also meeting our requirements or is a way of sort of providing more information about how our schools are doing so we can target support. How am I doing on time here? I guess, so I do want to just note, sort of as a technical piece of this, is that I'm aware, and I put this in my comments, that, you know, if some of these amendments pass, we will need to also create rationale to include in the report, in the resolution. And, you know, I really feel strongly about not having a summative rating. I think it actually is reductive. I know we've already talked about this. I think when we label schools, it doesn't help to do what we're trying to do, which is provide a better picture of what's happening. And in fact, it detracts from that. Even as somebody who doesn't give much credence to the stars, I can't help it. I'm a human. Like, I look at 1 star, and to me, that's a label that says shabby school. And I don't think that even if you make it more accurate, that's not what we're trying to do here. Ultimately, I think it puts the accountability in the wrong place. I think when a school is not doing well, the accountability should be with the system. And as long as we're able to identify what is happening in that school, and again, that should be on the system level, right? That is where the accountability lies, to make sure that that school gets the kinds of resources that it needs to make improvements. Looks like I'm almost out of time. If we get another round, Representative Patterson, I would like to hear more about your differentiation between, you said you're for a summative, but not for the stars. So that is something that if somebody else wants to ask that, or if I get another round, I would like to put out there.
Thank you. If all members don't go, I'm happy to give those that might want a second round another round. Are there any other Representative OLeary? You're muted.
Since I've been identified as the author of this amendment about what would be the summative assessment in some form or another, I was wondering if anybody had any questions about the amendment.
Berger, I think it would be helpful if you just gave a voiceover of the amendment. I kind of expected that in the discussion, and so I haven't really known how to chime in.
All right, a voiceover. Long ago, no, that's not how it starts. The state board recommends that the state superintendent explore alternatives to the current annual statewide assessment, i.e. the PARC, to ensure that any assessment of students is primarily focused on assessing student achievement and growth, and secondarily used for accountability at the school, state, and/or federal level. These alternatives could include, but not be limited to, formative assessments that are already in use in many district schools, such as MAP or ANET, or a statewide assessment created by OSSE in collaboration with our public school systems. I've spent quite a bit of time lately looking at the PARC test and trying to figure out if it has any kind of a reference point with a lot of our students. And I'll give you one example. A practice question on a 10th grade PARC ELA test was a text that I used as for my AP literature classes because it was an AP question on the AP literature exam, which, as I tell my students, is the hardest English test you'll ever take. Not in college or not any place in graduate school. The AP literature test really tests your ability to read and to write. And I couldn't understand why a question that was on the AP literature exam would be one of the questions on the 10th grade ELA test. And I think that has to do with the makers of the exam and with the way that people accept that as a standardized test, since the PARC test is now only used by the District of Columbia and maybe one other state. I'll stop there. If any, I still have time though, if there are any questions.
Representative OLeary, I will ask a quick question. Is it fair to say you're not wedded to what the assessment would be, but that you're recommending the OSSE find a replacement for PARC?
No, that's not completely fair to say.
Okay.
Yes, it is fair to say that I want a replacement, but I do not think that that 51% has to be wedded to one specific exam. I think that the PARC test has that one metric, which caused so much distrust from teachers because it took up so much time away from teaching. There's some way that you can figure that out so that you could, I always gave summative exams in my classes, but it was just a small percentage of what the grade would be.
So it's fair to say both look at changing the exam and the weights given to whatever the exam. Got it.
Thank you for that question.
No.
All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing hands, so I'm just going to go and then I'll go to other members. So I wrote this down. So there are some very hard truths that I think as a board we have to acknowledge. One is not all of our schools are doing right by all of our kids. That is a very hard truth that we have to acknowledge. And for me, that hits home more for Black and brown kids in the city. And I say that not at the fault of any teacher or leader or the school itself. There's a host of reasons: under-resourced schools, under-supported schools, the list goes on. Secondly, not all of our students are graduating from our schools ready to enter the world around them, whether that is to enter college, the workforce, what have you. Thirdly, our schools and teachers are being unfairly punished as a result of our current accountability system. And then fourth, our our definition of school quality, whether or not you debate that's what the point of our accountability system is, I think it's safe to say that's ultimately what it amounts to. That system is heavily focused on outputs only, kind of what Representative OLeary is just speaking to, and not enough on the inputs, as well as what we're going to do to change the outputs that we are seeing. So those 4 hard truths I jotted down, and I went through the recommendations to say, all right, how are these recommendations getting at changing these truths? That not all of our kids are doing well, our teachers in schools being unfairly punished, we're focused too much on outputs versus inputs, and our kids aren't graduating ready. And I think we have some work to do. That is the headline. I think the resolution has some work to do to get to where it needs to be. And I welcome the opportunity to continue to be a thought partner there. 3 things I would just throw out quickly. The dashboard. I know there's been a lot of conversation about it. I like that it gives parents the information that they find valuable versus telling parents what they should be concerned with. And so I think more than anything, that is what I see valuable in the dashboard. I look to Massachusetts, not surprising, as an example of how we could arrange the dashboard. They have 4 or 5 columns where parents can click in. And if I'm worried about growth, if I'm worried about school climate, if I'm worried about what have you, I can click on those metrics in that dashboard and learn a lot more about whatever respective school I'm interested in. They also allow you to compare school to school, so I can see not only in specific areas within a dashboard, I can compare schools across those metrics. Secondly, school support. I've been beating this drum for a long time, and I will admit, I don't necessarily have the answer. I appreciate that our resolution speaks to enhancing the school support that is connected to our accountability system, but I think there's a lot more to Representative Sutter's earlier point that we need to do and can do to specify exactly what that looks like. I would agree that it is not enough for only the bottom 5% of our schools to receive support. What I don't see in this resolution is specifying what exactly would that look like. Will it look like the Arkansas system that we talked about earlier? Would it be a multi-tiered support system like Massachusetts? Will it be money? Will it be staffing? What are the supports? What would trigger those supports? Again, as a critical element of inputs. And then lastly, cohort modeling. We haven't talked about this a lot, but I think there's a big opportunity here for us to really move the needle in thinking of our students in cohorts in 2 different ways. One is cohorting according to time. And so looking at school performance over 3 years, for instance, to see how do schools close the gap when they've had students for X amount of time. Another way could be trying to get to a closer apples to apples comparison, identifying what metrics matter, whether that's socioeconomic status, et cetera, and comparing students or whatever the metrics are in those buckets. I have some concerns and pause there, but I would just throw those out as things that I am wanting to see more of in this resolution. But again, just want to end on appreciation for the hard work that's led to us to this point. Representative Thompson.
Good evening. So I'm going to be honest in saying that I'm doing my best to listen because I have a standing civic association meeting that never allows me to attend anymore, and it is close. And so I'm trying to listen in to get my chance to update people on schools. That being said, I also just want to acknowledge that I will say, as someone who's not on this committee, I've had a really difficult time just kind of like following where we are at any point. I actually think the difficult truths as you laid them out, Representative Parker, aren't that difficult. It's not as far as saying them. They're not that difficult. They're not that controversial. And I actually think they are things we could and should be grappling with. I will just be honest, my experience with this process has been largely framed in, do you want a summative or do you want a dashboard? And actually, my guess is that's probably the least controversial of the recommendations, even though it did not make it out of the committee. But I actually think that was the wrong starting point. I think most people showed up to our public meeting last week and said, They didn't like the stars. And to be clear, the stars are not, and this is just a PSA to answer Representative Griswold's question out loud, because I'm pretty sure that other people also had the question. A summative can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be the stars. You can get rid of the stars and not recommend we don't have a summative. That being said, now that's not even a part of what's in front of us to vote, because the process has been so wonky. And like I have largely had really struggled in being able to engage and articulate in a way that helps us not think about, all right, do we have a summative? Do we have a dashboard? I think dashboards are good. I think the way they roll out is important. I hear all of that. I also have heard the fears that people have had around school closures. I was part of the Washington Met fight. When I first became the chair of the Ed Council in 2012, I became the chair a month after they announced they were closing 5 schools in our ward. I get it. I get that that is painful. And I think that as a board, we're not advocates, like we're policymakers. And so our job is to listen to the advocates and to the community members and to the families, and then take it and make it actionable policy. The wrestling with how do we weight indicators, which indicators, is it, who are we holding accountable? Like all of that stuff is the stuff we're supposed to do. And I really have wanted more engagement around that. I have been extremely frustrated because I think a lot of the conversations we've had have been based in the board and the administration as far as OSSI that we've had before. And I wasn't a part of either one of those. Like, and so I feel like that's how we got to a place of being so focused on the stars and only the stars. I actually wish we would have parsed it in retrospect and saying, hey, like, do we want to take a vote on, do we want a dashboard or do we want stars? Hey, do we want to take a vote on like who are we holding accountable and what are we focused on accountability for, and a tool for parents that's useful, or are we focused on accountability as the system? And then we could have gotten to the aesthetics and what indicators show up, but we didn't do that. We tried to do it all at one time. And as somebody who is, again, not on this committee and had to participate in other committees, had to put my old ANC hat on today and get some roads plowed and salted, it's been really difficult from a capacity standpoint and just from a like intellectually following where we are at any given time. And so I've struggled with that. I'm sure others have struggled with that. And I actually think a lot of the hesitation that you saw from people not wanting to raise their hands is actually people not knowing how to chime in productively in this conversation, as opposed to having thoughts. That's just something I think should be said. And I actually don't think this issue has had to be as divisive as it was, which is super frustrating for me.
Thank you for that. And I hear you loud and clear. I really appreciate that. Representative Bernstein, I'm going to go to you next.
Okay, similarly to what Representative Thompson was saying, like off a different note, I'm not sure exactly how this fits perfectly into the conversation, but I just wanted to bring something up that was extremely important to me, is that students are acutely aware of where their school falls in a ranking system. And I think that often, not just at my school, but like across schools from many of my peers, is represented as students lack confidence in their school. So at a certain point, they just feel like they should just give up because it's okay. Like my school's in the, like, not my school personally, but people will say, my school's in the bottom 5%. I'm not gonna get a good education. So why should I put the effort in? And even though this doesn't fit perfectly into our conversation at this moment, I think it's really important. Like when we talk about, I believe it was Representative Sutter, apologies if that's incorrect, about like our purpose. I think that a purpose should also center like the way students view their education, because I know a lot of times for like elementary students and middle school students, a lot of times those schools are chosen by their parents. But as students get into high school and they are able to like exercise their autonomy in choosing their schools, I think it's very important how like rankings of schools reflect on both the schools and the students that attend them, because it also brings up conversation of people
oftentimes look down on students from other schools, like schools that perform really highly on the star ranking system versus schools that don't. The students might come into some conflict there. And obviously, like we said, that has a lot to do with the average income in the area that the school is located in, the average race of students that attend that school, and that will disproportionately affect Black and Brown students. And I think that it's just very important when we're considering, and I apologize if this was all over the place, but I think it's very important in considering building purpose that we're considering the way it affects students that attend the schools that are labeled in the bottom 5%. And similarly to what Dr. OLeary was mentioning, and definitely has been mentioning, like in the past few meetings that I've watched, when we only look at students' assessment or a student's level based on like a standardized assessment, that fails to like account for all the students like English language learners or students with learning disabilities that might not be able to yet meet the state standards for their grade level, but have made like over a year's worth of progress. Just they started lower than the standard for their grade level, so a year's worth of progress would not get them to the grade level. And again, I apologize if that was all over the place, but I just wanted to share my piece.
No, that was very clear. No, thank you for that. Representative Wattenberg.
Thanks. Thanks for all of these comments, everybody. President Frazier, do I have my full 4 minutes? I mean, I used 2 to introduce this in the role as chair, but.
Yes, you have 4 minutes.
Okay. So first, I want to address a couple of things that were raised, and then I want to talk about the additional amendment. First, and this is partly to Representative Thompson, it's partly to others. And I would say it's very much to President Parker. Our schools have a lot of problems. They have a lot of issues. There's a lot here. This is not meant to solve everything. The solution is not meant to solve everything. The issues we raise are not meant to solve everything. Here's what it's meant to solve. 1, we have a way of rating our schools that is misleading. When we say bias, part of what we mean is it's misleading. It doesn't actually capture the actual quality of a given school if you think that has to do with learning. And it's done in a very biased way, and it's done in a way that promotes a lot of testing. So we wanted to address that. And there was 2 ways to do it. One is to change the formula, and another was to get rid of it, to eliminate it. I will speak for myself. I spent a lot of time trying to think through how we could keep it, but just change it. And I have to say, I talked to a lot of different people. I don't think it's possible. And the reality is no real proposal came to us about how to do it in a serious way, where you could really replace, where you could have a summative rating, doesn't have to be stars, grades, whatever, that wasn't biased and that was fair. That's why I personally ultimately ended up in the place where I said, we have to have a dashboard. So then the second thing is, if you're not going to have a rating, the second thing we want to do is to be able to show very transparently to people what's going on in your school. How are they doing? Is it reaching the standards we want it to reach? So that's the second thing. And that's why the dashboard was so important. And that's why the survey research that we did was so important. And it's why the engagement people did in different wards was so important. And why the engagement we did as a board was so important, to try to really get a sense of what that was, what should be on the dashboard, what are the top priorities. So that's what we put forward. And by the way, that relates to my amendment, which I'm going to raise in just a second. And the third thing it was supposed to do is, in making all this transparent, this speaks to everybody, the things that people have raised about the importance of, that this isn't going to get everybody the money they need. But what we hope it does is that it's going to make very clear to the entire public, to school communities, to the council, to us, what are the strengths and weaknesses in different schools, so that we as a board, individual school communities and others can advocate in a way that makes sense because they have the data to do it with. And that, now let me just say about the amendment that I think John Paul, our executive director, is circulating, is one of the things that was raised at the board meeting. I think it was also part of what I talked to Representative Thompson about, was, to your point, some of the different issues that we wanted to raise. A lot of that, what people wanted to see, a lot of that It had to do with before and after care. It had to do with restorative justice. It had to do with socio-emotional learning. It had to do with different programs. And some of that got captured in an earlier draft and some of it didn't. And also there was a lot of concern, which I agreed with when I realized it, was that the priority indicators we had were so heavily focused on testing. And so we've addressed that by sort of adding a couple of priorities to it and juggling some others. So I want you to know why you got that. It's to reflect in our priorities in the dashboard what we've been hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Patterson.
I have appreciated the conversation thus far, but I want to state that I think as Representative Thompson came out and said, is that how we went about framing this, the narrative of what we were going to do in this redesign, was probably done, I think, my personal opinion, done wrong, because it was aimed really at stars, people's disagreement with stars and how they negatively impact schools, which I think is a good conversation, but has nothing to do with equity or anything like that as far as what a school receives, what the metrics are, how do we look at those things to make a school. So I think we can achieve both. I think we take stars away, and I've said that before, and change the narrative of how we view schools. Schools like Baloo that are in my ward that have always had this negative narrative, and that the star framework kind of like makes it seem even worse. There are ways that we could use the dashboard and still have a summative so that we can hold people accountable. And again, I've said stars are about design. We can use any type of design that we want. A summative is making sure that we can hold someone accountable and also make sure that they're providing the support that we need. And that's why I've always said that it doesn't have to be an either or. We framed this in a way, in a narrative, and the way that we presented it to the public in general was that it had to be either or. You either had to, like stars or didn't like the stars, or you had to have a summative or not have a summative. And that's not necessarily the conversation. What we're talking about is how schools are viewed and how we support them. And I think that's possible. I don't think, and I've heard a lot of the conversation, I don't really think this resolution, or we have agreed upon moving a resolution that truly reflects the true will of this body, this governing body right now. So that's where I am. I wanted to state that on the record, is that, I think there's a lot of work that can be put forth in a resolution that truly speaks to how we change the narrative about schools and how we hold people accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Lopez.
Thank you. I just had a really quick thought, and my thought was on, so we're all talking about great points and it's a great discussion, but we may need to take a look at the way that this dashboard or summative rating will be read, because if we're thinking about adding so much information into this new way that will be used to school, then we're adding lots of information. We're trying to pay attention to one specific detail, but we have much other information on another topic. All of this information that is getting thrown at us or that we have in front of us may be confusing. And, coming from someone from experience, that my school was my last resource. I was not going to go to check because none of my teachers wanted me to go there. That was just not what I was going to do. But I ended up going there. I've experienced the way that I've been at check, and I wouldn't have made another decision if I had a chance to. I'm happy where I am, but we need to find a way to display this sense of belonging that a student feels in this dashboard or whatever decision that we take in right now. Well, not right now, but whatever decision that is taken. And a parent can be shown the school report card, can be shown this dashboard, but how do parents interpret this information? Because someone may take a look at one piece of information. If we're focusing a lot of stars, so if my mom were to take a look at a school that has 1 star, to her that wouldn't matter, because her mantra is that the student makes the school, and that's what matters. Whatever the student is feeling at the school, then that's it's student's choice. But I guess that would be fine if we're thinking that a star does not represent a school. But we could go ask someone else, and to them, the star would really mean this is a horrible school. Like this is a bad school. I don't want to send my child there. And we're hearing about the school climate, we're hearing about the school environment, we're looking at test results, and they're like, well, teachers are not doing a good job. And all of this information may just be confusing. And coming from like a student perspective, when we're giving lots of information, and it may be incredibly valuable to everyone else, but if we're not really understanding what's happening, if we're not really understanding what's going on or what's in front of us, then there's no point of being given all of this information. And I think
we lost you, Representative Lopez.
Can we stop the clock for her?
Okay.
that's what I have to say.
Representative Lopez, I think we missed the last 30 seconds of your remarks. Do you want to just characterize what you shared?
Yeah, I noticed after that. Thank you. I was just saying that if we're giving lots of good information, it would be great to know what we're analyzing and what we're taking a look at, because sometimes we are being given so much great information, but we don't really know how to take that in.
I think that's a great point to end on. Members, we were set to end on this portion at 7:20. I'm seeing a number of folk with their hands raised for a second round. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to 1 minute each. Just speak your piece, just so we can stick to our time. Representative Chen did not go, so you'll get your full 4 minutes.
Thank you, President Parker, and everybody. So very macro level, agree, and I think we're all on the same page that the really difficult work of equity for all students is much deeper than the breadth of this particular conversation. And I just want to make sure that we are continuing to zoom out to make sure that we're thinking about what the specific problems are that we are aiming to solve and how the proposals we put forward will solve those problems. And you've heard me ask at all of our expert panels who the audience is for, right? When we talk about this, and we've had administrators. Some folks have answered that it's for administrators. Some folks have answered it's for families to better understand how to make sense of what the right education is for their students. And I still think that there are times in this conversation where we're conflating the two. And I just want to make sure that we are solving both and making sure that we're naming what piece of the problem the particular proposal is solving for. And so my question, I think this is to the two chairs, if I may.
Representative Chen, you're muted. Went out for a second.
Oops, sorry about that. So just a question to Representative Wattenberg and Representative Patterson. In thinking through how what we've proposed breaks down between and who the audience is for the different elements of the proposal that we've put forward. I know that's broad. I know we can't answer that in my 4 minutes, but would just love your take on how we think through matching the audience, the problem, and the solution.
I'll try to answer the question really quick. My focus has always been parents and students to make sure that we are being held accountable and hold people accountable for providing them the type of education that they need. So that has always been my focus as I went through this process and been my audience. I do take into consideration teachers and principals and those type of things. The other individuals that also have a great part in our education, but my main focus has been students and parents.
If I may follow up, Rep. Patterson, given that, right, it sounds like you would position this recommendation to be focused on how we communicate to families, right? It is a communication question. And so what Representative Lopez mentioned around clarity of how we actually not only display, but also perhaps educate and clarify what these various elements that we decide to prioritize, right, actually mean is most important.
I wanted to make sure that this framework accountability tool was something that they could use to hold people accountable. That parents and students could hold someone accountable. So this is happening in my school. These are the metrics that we've been measured by, and this is what I'm advocating for. That has always been my focus.
And can I just say, I mean, to me, the audiences, Representative Chang, are ESSA gets the information that it needs, and the stakeholders, both the stakeholders who, to Representative Patterson's point, need the information to hold their schools accountable, go to school meetings, ask their principal what the priorities are, do what needs to be done at the school level, and also so that stakeholders can take it to the DC Council or to us or to the mayor's agencies and say, these are the issues we're facing. To a conversation you and I had, it makes public the information so we can have a public conversation, whereas the rating itself is so opaque. That's it.
And on that point then, Representative Wattenberg.
Sorry, Representative, that is time.
Okay.
Please use the chat. Members, let's 1 minute, very quick rounds. Representative Reed, OLeary, Vice President Gazoo, then Representative Wattenberg as co-chair. I'll give you the last word. Maybe you can get Representative Chang's response in there. So Representative Reed, 1 minute.
Thank you. So I am glad the name of Blue High School was evoked, because if you speak to Blue High School, they say to let go of a single summative rating. So that's one part. I want also members to read the 9 pages, because even in this conversation, we are just getting stuck on one thing. And that document really, again, I think if we look at strengths-based, we agreed on more than we disagree on, but I also need members to, one, dig into the document and read it, and then compare it to what your constituents are saying. I don't need to hear personal. I don't want to hear history. Like, look into what constituents said. They took time to do our surveys. They took time to talk to us. Constituent feedback sessions. The process was messy. Well, I would say also it's clear who is accountable. In the law, it's the state who's accountable. So that's pretty much laid out there. And it's for the state to help get the schools together, but also support the schools. The process was messy because we wanted to give information after we finished constituent feedback. So if you all remember, we were done in December. That's why, again, being responsive to constituents' feedback. And I'll just close with, we need a drastic change because we keep remixing what we have found to be bias. And we can't keep expecting by dibbling and dabbling in bias to keep getting the same, we're going to keep getting the same results. So I would, encourage members to remember, especially those who were at the table when OSCE proposed this current thing, we need something different. And parents, people have asked for this already. Our goal and our task was we came back to this because we already saw the bias. We did a report. Now we're being responsive and closing that loop in. I'm sorry for going over. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Representative OLeary.
Last month, I invited all of you to come to our AP reunion, a virtual AP reunion at Cardozo. It was our 21st year of an AP reunion where the former students come back and talk to the current students. I will send the video of that reunion to all of you, and it'll answer everything that the students were saying about how their school was looked at or how people looked at this or whatever. And you'll be knocked out by the testimony that these students gave just about AP, but the way that they did it at a school that is always rated with 1 star and will always be rated as long as there's a star rating at 1 star, because they don't have, they're not judged fairly. Thank you.
Thank you. With 6 seconds to spare, Representative Thompson. Representative Thompson, are you there?
I am here. I'm trying to get out of this civic association meeting. Hold on one second.
Okay, while she transitions, Vice President Gazoo, 1 minute.
Thank you. I guess I was mainly going to say a lot of what Representative Reed said about there is a lot more in the resolution. I'm not sure why folks are getting so hung up on the summative rating piece. It's very important. I guess I'm also offline. I would like to engage with folks who feel strongly there should be a summative in some other form, why that is so important to what does it tell us about our schools that rating some of the indicators that are important wouldn't do. Because for me, the summative makes it less transparent. It is a value judgment, right, on what we should value, as President Parker said. Finally, I just want to say that in considering how to make revisions, I would like the chairs to think about, I was actually glad to see that there were some areas that were not clearly not clearly laid out exactly what OSSE should do, because I want to collaborate with OSSE as a board to figure out those. We're not psychometricians, as I think Dr. Sutter said. We need their technical expertise and we want to collaborate with them. So I'm sure there are areas we need more clarity, but I think there's reasons not to clarify everything. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing more and more hands now. Representative Thompson, we're going to come back to you.
Okay, thank you for your patience and allowing me to multitask, because I needed to be in a civic association meeting. And so I apologize if I am, what am I taking us back? I actually wanted to respond to something Representative Wattenberg said about this dashboard summative issue, because I do want to be clear. I do not think, I do think that we need to wrestle with like the formula. And that matters. And like there's an assumption that not having a dashboard doesn't means that we're not making certain choices about what we value. We're still making choices about what we're value, because you can't have every single thing that's happening on the school in a dashboard. We're going to make some selections about how things are measured, and for accountability purposes with regards to OSSE, there will still be a formula, whether it's displayed on the report card or not, that says this is what the bottom 5% of schools are. And like those things are super important. I'm someone who came on this board and was totally all right with us having a dashboard. So again, I've been struggling because I wanted us to wrestle with what is it that we measure? What is it that we care about? What is it that we're saying is important for schools? And I also would encourage the board to figure out as we move forward, despite whatever, I don't know, comes out of this STAR school report card conversation. I think it's actually really important for us to be having conversations around accountability and who we hold accountable for things, period. And so I don't feel like we've necessarily had that conversation. Those are the things that I am excited to grapple with. And last thing, I think there's also some confusion, because I've had people say to me like, okay, well, how are y'all going to vote? And like, I don't even think people understand, because now that we are having different, like we've changed what we're presenting as recommendations versus amendments. If we vote on a resolution as it is, it does not include removing the summative. I want to be very clear with people about that, because I don't think people know that. And I think people are trying their best to keep pace with what's in front of us, like I am. But we have made changes since the public meeting. And if we vote on the resolution as it is, it does not include that. So I just want to be honest, upfront, and transparent with people about where we are in the conversation now, because a lot of it has been framed as if you vote yes, then you're voting to get rid of the summative, and that's not even in the resolution we have.
Thank you. As a point of clarification, the amendments the summative issue is taken up in the amendments, which is also up for
Right,
vote.
but sorry, but and this
I'm
is a
sorry,
point of
I'm sorry, Representative.
no, but this is a point
Representative
of
Sutter,
process.
I'm sorry, you've gone way over.
I'll put it in the chat, but
Thank
it is
you.
confusing
Representative
because
Sutter,
we
I'm
will
gonna
have to
go-
vote
I'm
on the
sorry.
resolution as yes
Understood.
to then consider the
Representative Sutter,
amendment.
understood. Representative Sutter, I'm going to go to you just for the sake of time.
Thanks. I just want to give voice to the conversation Representative Reed and I were having in the chat, which is about, for me, the question is no longer about a summative rating. Is it about, are we setting a goal as a state against which we ask our schools to make progress towards? Or are we saying all of our schools, many of our schools are struggling, so let's just compare them to one another by comparing how a school is doing to the average? Representative Reed keeps saying this in the chat, the goals are in the state plan. My point is that our rating system, whether it be rating on individual indicators or rating as a whole, either one, should compare schools to progress against those state goals, not against some state average at the moment. So for me, this question is, who are we holding accountable? The state is accountable for how our schools perform, but we're holding schools accountable to their progress towards goals we agree are necessary for all students to succeed post high school, in life, college, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Johnson.
Hey, I just have some quick points that I want to raise. The star rating is basically focused on whether or not we are exceeding expectations. And so when you begin to look at these ratings and you begin to look at our schools, you process us as undercategorized versus higher award schools who have these better scores. And so what I really want to raise here is that in order to change the dynamics, as students and as members of the board, I feel like we relatively need to reshape the narrative of how we're viewing things and how we are measuring things. Because relatively now, I feel as though like when you're looking at these scores and you're looking at these ratings and the below 5%, you're seeing that we have these low scores. And does this mean as a kid that I'm less deserving of educational opportunities rather than schools that have these higher stars? And so like Representative Sutter brought along to my attention earlier is that I feel like it's not giving us enough credit at all. And so that's just something that I wanted to bring up that was kind of just focusing and like narrating in my mind right now. But thank you guys.
Thank you. Representative Bernstein.
Yeah, so I can't see the time, so I'll try and get exactly to a minute, but I want to echo something that Representative Lopez said, or at least how I understood it. A lot of times seeing this data or seeing the visual graphics, I just don't know, like looking into schools, what to do anymore with that specific data. I don't know what it means and I don't know how to contextualize it. So I think it would be very smart to make sure that there's like a certain standard for contextualization, just because if no matter if we use a summative rating or a dashboard or whatever, I just think a lot of times parents and especially older students just don't really know what this data means. So I think whatever we pick, we should then further pick things that are extremely important to parents and students. And just also very briefly, I think we need to make sure that we're centering like students in this conversation, which I think is what Representative Johnson was saying, but I think sometimes we can get lost on just administration or just teachers. But I think it's really important that we like focus this conversation around how we best facilitate school culture amongst students. Sorry if that was over time.
Nope. And last word, I'm going to give it to you, Representative Wattenberg, co-chair.
Thank you. I just want to say my number's not there. My time isn't there. I don't see it.
Yeah, so staff can't run 1 minute clock, so I'm doing it via phone.
Okay, so somebody give me a heads up. Anyway, what I want to acknowledge that a lot of different issues are on the table. Representative OLeary had put forward the idea of we need to get started on trying to come up with a different assessment. That's how I read that amendment, and I think we do. Representative Patterson and others have talked about how important it is to think more about how are we going to support these individual schools? How are we going to support the technical assistance they need? How are we going to advocate? What I want to say is all of these are important, but we need to start somewhere. And the point of this is to start somewhere. And I think we really don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We have a very clear problem here. And it was raised very well, I think, by the students. Students are made to feel very bad by this. So are staff, so are families. we can get rid of it and also provide what's needed to parents who want the information, and it can aid our advocacy, and we can take up some other issues. And I hope we will. That's it.
Thank you. Right on time. Members, I know that is not satisfying, but again, it is the start of a conversation. And I'm going to end by saying this, and then we're going to go to our next agenda item. We as a body have gone on record to say that our current system is inadequate, and not even just that, that it is biased. And so it will be a dereliction of duty for us to sit by and do nothing. So I'm just echoing what Representative Wattenberg is saying. And while I will agree that this resolution needs some work, I again want to applaud the committee and co-chairs Wattenberg and Patterson, but also just want to underscore that we all must lean in to get this to the right place. And whether that means we need more time outside of this month's public meeting, whether that means we need more meetings, we need to bring in more experts. I think we need to be solutions oriented in finding out what that right place is. So I'll just end it there. But again, thank you for such a rich discussion. We are slightly behind, but not nearly as far behind as I was afraid we might be. And so next up, we are going to entertain conversations for leadership announcements. We have allotted 20 minutes for this time. We are going to give those that are interested 3 minutes to speak your piece. You will be able to share what role you're interested in, if you're interested in a role, and why. And then we're going to leave it at that. We're not going to do questions or anything like that. And for members of the public, as well as our new members, we will vote officially at January's public meeting. Before we get started, this is an opportunity for me to publicly say it has been a pleasure to serve and an honor to serve as the president of this body. I've shared with I believe all of you that I will not be seeking another term as president, as I am exploring other ways to have an impact for our students and our schools and our communities. But this is the first time that I'm saying that publicly. So with that, we will first entertain conversations for those who are interested in president. We will have a 3-minute clock. If you raise your hand, I will call on you, and then we'll go to the next person. When I don't see any more hands, I'll then go to vice president. And then we'll end there. First up, Vice President Gazoo.
Thank you, President Parker, and thank you so much for your service. It's been such a pleasure serving with you. So first, I want to thank the members for giving me the opportunity to serve as Vice President on the leadership team this past year. I am proud of the systems and practices I've helped President Parker to establish, including the equity framework, our new committee structure, providing transparency through consistent readouts from our leadership meetings and committee work. I am also very proud of the work I have done this year to expand our budget for language access services, to lead board advocacy for system level funding, to ensure equitable access to outdoor learning, and the steps I have taken to strengthen connections with our sister agencies through monthly check-ins and by pursuing opportunities for collaboration, most recently around Safe Passage and our Emergent Parent Engagement Committee. Going forward, I plan to actively pursue ways to increase our collaboration with our Student Advisory Committee and to extrapolate from our current equity framework to create a more streamlined and actionable tool to shape our priorities and to guide our work. But two things in particular I have really prepared me for this work. First, the relationships I've built on the board with our council members, our agency leaders, and out in the community. On the board, it has been my goal as VP to make myself available to all members, to be a collaborator, to be as responsive as possible to your concerns, and to be proactive about checking in when I think something is off. In the community, I have reached beyond my own ward to build citywide networks of stakeholder support and shared practice. And I have built strong lines of communication with city leaders, including with our new superintendent, who has expressed in her appreciation for our work that we have done to, quote, reset the partnership between OSSE and the state board. Second, I have been involved with almost every committee, and I have learned a lot about your priorities and concerns. You have helped me to gain insight into aspects of our structures and norms that work well and others that need more finessing. You have made clear that we need to better define parameters for the various roles we play, and that we would benefit from shared norms regarding deportment in public meetings and on social media. You have planted the seeds of exciting new work streams that I will help nurture, while also keeping our social studies work on track and laying the foundation for future collaboration around revision for the STAR framework. Finally, continuity matters. I hope that I have earned your trust and confidence this past year, and that you allow me to continue in leadership as president of the board in order to build on all that I have learned over the past year to help guide our work and build our capacity to engage authentically and responsively with stakeholders. In closing, okay.
That is time. Thank you, Vice President Kasoy. Next, I'm going to call on Representative OLeary.
Colleagues, I would like your support for me to be your next president. The leadership experience that I have gained throughout my life and my ability to collaborate with everyone on the board to help us become an even greater educational force in our city provides me with the credentials to be your next leader. I have always been a leader. As the captain of many teams during my long career as an athlete, as an officer in the United States Army, as a coach of many sports over 40 years, as a teacher trainer for the College Board, as the president of the Penn Faulkner Foundation, and as someone who has served in many leadership roles, most importantly, as an educator for over 50 years. I feel extremely well qualified to be your representative in discussions with education leaders of our city and to forcefully give voice for our students, parents, and those who work in our schools every day. I truly believe that the president of the board is no more or less powerful than the other members. The president should be a collaborative voice, someone who creates an environment where all voices are heard and valued. We were all elected to serve our unique wards, to represent their voices. One member has no power. Only working together does the board have authority. My philosophy as a leader has always been to surround myself with individuals whose expertise allows the team to excel. I believe that committees should operate the same way, collaboratively, and through consensus when possible. As you all know, I'm not one to spend a lot of time circling around what I believe. I believe in this board and the unlimited capacity that we have to foster educational change in our city. I am also a strict believer in sticking to our schedule in our meetings and staying on the clock so that everyone has a say. Since we are now a veteran board with independent minds who care about the education that goes on every day in all of our schools, I would like to use my leadership skills to allow us to remain focused on that caring and to work together as we continue our quest to make our schools a model for the future of education. Thank you for listening, and I welcome your support.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Sutter.
Thank you, President Parker. During the 3 years of my term, the state board has had 2 different leadership teams. Each was dedicated to the work of the board and committed to serving the interests of district students, families, and schools. While the teams differed in leadership style in important ways, and the most recent leadership team helped the board make really important structural changes, I think our board needs something different as we head into 2022. We need a leader who will provide a clear and compelling vision, refine and evolve the valuable committee structures we have in place, serve as a strong facilitator for 9 independently elected officials, and continue to develop positive collaborative working relationships with education agency partners. Our board already has big goals for the year ahead that are works in progress, changing the STAR framework to be more an equitable statewide accountability system, recommending changes to help make the unique and complex DC public education governance system more effective, passing the new DC social studies standards, transforming the way the district addresses literacy in both schools and communities, ensuring that DC can recruit, retain, and support highly effective and experienced educators for all our schools. That's a ton of work. We need a clear vision and roadmap to accomplish these 5 ambitious goals with the limited time and staff capacity available to our board. We also need to allow adequate time and resources for the inevitable new issues that will arise over the course of the year, and an approach to discerning what new or emerging issues warrants a change in our collective attention. Our current committee structure seems to have worked well, but we need leadership to further refine our committee expectations, to create guidelines about the time spent and how that time is spent in committee meetings, and to approve upon the feedback loop between committees and the full board. I think the Advocacy and Outreach Committee has done a great job on that, and I hope that might be a model for the work. We need leadership that will help facilitate the work of accomplishing these collective goals with 9 independently elected officials with individual consistencies. This is incredibly difficult work, requires diplomacy and a willingness to navigate the tensions between the goals of the board and the individual goals of any single member. I firmly believe that our work as a collective body has the power to transform elements of our education system, which are not working as they ought to for all DC students. But doing so may mean prioritizing the goals of our board over specific interests of any individual vocal constituency. Finally, the reality of our board is that we can do very little to affect change unilaterally. We can and have passed powerful resolutions that have spurred actions by both elected and appointed officials. To achieve our 5 goals, we need leadership with strong relationships with our education agency partners and a willingness to see those partners as essential collaborators to plan and execute with in pursuit of our goals. I ask for your support with my role as a presidential candidate for the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I'm not seeing any other hands. So with that, we will close the nominations for candidates for president. And I would just mention with 3 candidates, our bylaw state that a member must receive 5 votes at the public meeting. And so that is just important to note that should none of these candidates receive 5 votes, we will have to keep voting until one does. So that's just a point of information for you all. With that, I'll entertain motions for, is this question Representative Wattenberg? Yes.
In terms of the process, I mean, do we have a process that says it's going to be ranked choice voting? So like the top 2 run off, or it's just that we just keep negotiating and go on until everybody's tired, like they used to do at the Democratic conventions?
Our bylaws currently do not have any specification around how we navigate.
Okay.
But it does state that a member must be elected with 5 votes.
Thank you.
With that, those interested in the vice president role, please raise your hand and I'll call on you. You 2 will have 3 minutes to make your case. Representative Reed.
So greetings, members. As stated in December, I am interested in serving as your next vice president. Let me get to my Google Doc 1 second. So I'm running for vice president to support the board having a strong voice that reflects our neighbors, our education community, and constituents. From month 1, and I cannot believe it's already been a year, I have pushed for accountability. So January this time last year, by drafting our oversight document that was used for oversight season to our education partners. I've also refined processes for how we provide or how we process feedback in a fair way as the leader of the Outreach and Advocacy Committee. I've also engaged in reopening work, safe passage engagement, which both left led to, or contributed to key legislation from DC City Council, and again, in collaboration with a variety of stakeholders. And even going above and beyond by the lovely STAR framework and recommendations that we discussed so boldly today. I just took initiative on trying to consolidate feedback on those items, again, guided by constituent feedback. And I'll just close with, you always hear me quote directly from my residents, constituents, students, parents from Ward 8. And I look forward to expanding that and representing the voices throughout the city through this role as Vice President of the State Board of Education. And I appreciate any trust with your votes. I'm happy to talk to any folks who want more information or provide what you're seeking from me as a candidate. So feel free to reach out, or I'll reach out to you whenever's convenient. And that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there others? Okay, not seeing any other. Okay, Representative Thompson.
I'm going to be honest. I raised my hand because I've been asked by a whole bunch of people to raise my hand. And I think what I have learned, or maybe already knew when coming to this board, is that these bodies are bodies of peers, and that peers need to be led as such and respected as such. I think that's actually something we've been lacking in the past year. I will be quite honest in saying that it is okay to disagree. I think disagreement is healthy. I think what's actually even more important is respect and places where colleagues can sharpen and push each other. And I think that's a space that we can create as a board. When I joined the board, I was asked, like, how do you like being on the board? And I said, largely it's met my expectations because I knew what I was getting into. I already understood the education landscape. I already understood where we fit. And I also said to people, what I have been pleasantly surprised by is, by and large, I think I have really good colleagues because on a board like this, you don't get to pick your colleagues. I think that, and I believe I shared this with a couple people, like I know when Representative Gazoo reached out about her presidency, I shared it with her. I think we've had some missed opportunities as far as being able to truly leverage all the strengths that all of the members bring. And I think that as we've grown into a board and we now have members who, like myself, who are no longer in their first year, we've built some muscle. I think we have had some wins. I think we are doing a better job with engagement. I think those are also things that we can continue to build on. And I think that there are things that, we can continue to just build respect in the education space. I know that my work on the board governance committee is not necessarily the sexiest work, but I think it's really important work long term. And I think it's work that I've at least really pushed really hard to figure out how to engage people in. And I think that is the work of the board. Like, we are a policy body. We are a policy body that is advising consent. We have to figure out how to not just be reactionary to what's happening in any given day. We have to be pragmatic and we have to think long term. And so that's the reason I joined the board. Those are the things I think that I would bring in. And I think those are the reasons that people have kind of pushed me to raise my hand, which is why I don't have a prepared statement today.
Thank you. Are there others? All right, not seeing any. And just to clarify, these are not nominations. These are just simple announcements. Members, I would encourage you to talk with one another and seek understanding around what folks' visions are, as well as what they believe they can bring to this work. And as mentioned, similar to the presidential role, For vice president, they too must secure 5 votes at the public meeting. It is the first matter of business that we must take up by our bylaws. And so before anything else, we will have to take up our leadership vote. And with that, we are going to move on. I am seeing that we have been joined by, I guess I now say former student representative O'Sullivan. Welcome. And we're excited to have you. Just for the sake of time, we were going to do the tribute for Representative O'Sullivan in new business, and we still have a little bit of time. So, okay, we're doing good. We're going to go through committee reports. First up is Student Advisory Committee. Each committee has noted 5 minutes, but if you do not have 5 minutes, you do not need to take up all of that time. And so who is going to present the Student Advisory Committee report?
I'll go ahead and read the statement.
Awesome.
In our last Student Advisory Committee meeting, we had Council Member Christina Henderson speak to us about safe passage, vaccination outreach, and college readiness. Currently, the Student Advisory Committee has been working on finalizing the citywide survey and youth vaccination initiatives in order to administer the survey soon. Notably, we're also still looking for a student from Ward 7 or 8 to fill the 4th student representative vacant position. Lastly, in our upcoming meeting on Monday, we will be having Representatives Wattenberg and Patterson to discuss the STAR Framework Resolution and Ms. Kosoliva from Councilmember Robert White's office. As we proceed into the new calendar year, we can acknowledge all of the exciting, assiduous work the Student Advisory Committee has in store. Ultimately, we look forward to a continuation of progression, growth, and student advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Admin Committee report.
Thank you, President Parker. So the big take, first of all, I just want to say that I messed up the date on it. So it's obviously not January 15th, 2021. It was from December, if you read the report. The big takeaways from our meeting was a report out from Mr. Hayworth about the old council chambers. Should we be able to meet back in person, hopefully at some point? It seems that we would not be able to use that space, and that is, there's no set time when we would be able to again, because the mayor is still using it to make her press conferences. So we are actively looking for an alternative space. We need a space big enough to accommodate 9 elected members, 4 student reps, and the state superintendent and Mr. Hayworth. So that's a lot of folks. And it also must be accessible for cable television, film, movies, etc. So if you have ideas, there were some ideas shared, but please do reach out directly to Mr. Hayworth so that we can someday meet in person again. We also talked a bit about the budget enhancements, and that, you know, both of our sister offices are hoping that the mayor's office will find funding to upgrade their database systems. And this is a request that has been made for multiple years. So we're just hopeful that that will come through. And then finally, we just discussed sort of the process going forward with what we did today. So around the share out with the star rating. So that was sort of all that we were able to cover at our last meeting. There is actually, I would just note, this is not in the report. There is a written process that Mr. Hayworth wrote out after that meeting based on what we talked about that I think we should share with members. So after the meeting, we can share out what the next steps are for what will happen with the comments we made in this meeting, moving towards the vote. at our public meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the Accountability and Assessments Committee, but I have a feeling there might not be much to report out on given the conversation. I am not seeing Representatives Wattenberg or Patterson, so we're going to keep it moving. Board governance, is there a committee?
Yeah, so the Board Governance Committee did not meet because we actually had one item to discuss. And as we all know now, sometimes meetings can be emails. Here is the email. We asked we asked for the board to consider extending our committee and removing our sunset clause. We did not provide a new date. But that was our only point of discussion. We do look forward to, at our next board governance meeting, diving more deeply into the feedback from the fall engagement sessions. But, you know, our meeting was an email, which I always appreciate.
Thank you. I always appreciate efficiency. Next up, education standards. Is there a committee report?
Yeah, thank you, President Parker. We did not meet in December because it coincided with the holiday break. We are going to meet in January. We had 3 things that we had emailed back and forth about in the meantime. The first is the change to the social studies standards timeline, which was discussed with the entire board at the last public meeting. The second was the letter that we wrote to Superintendent Grant about virtual learning standards. We did receive a response back, and that was in the leadership readout. There's been some follow-up questions on that. I know that will come up at our January meeting. And then Representative Chang asked us for some feedback on literacy work. And Representative Chang, I'll give the balance of the time to you if you'd like to share more on that.
Thank you so much, Representative Sutter. The Literacy Steering Committee that we've been convening with the various acronyms that work on literacy across the city has been going really well. And we have our next meeting on January 19th, right before our board meeting. And this is a time for us to keep refining a vision statement for the various agencies around where we go and the direction that we steer the ship for literacy work in the coming years. And I'm really excited to share that it's been very collaborative across the various stakeholders, and would love folks' feedback if you are available and interested to provide it.
Awesome.
Thank you, President Parker.
Thank you. Moving right along, outreach and advocacy.
Alrighty, so the Outreach and Advocacy Committee met on December 17th. Representatives Reed, Gazoo, and OLeary were present. Participants, we reviewed testimony as we always do from the December public meeting. Of course, most of our public comment was related to proposed recommendations for revising the STAR framework. The group discussed elements of, and so we said that probably the appropriate committee was following up with that, which they are. The group also discussed elements of reopening that the board may not have considered, because we acknowledged at that time the folks or members present, no one had any direct feedback yet about reopening, but we assumed it was going to come. The areas that we kind of honed in on or figured that were happening based on some conversation where we want to consider how the State Board of Education can recruit or help schools with recruiting volunteers, teachers, and substitutes. So basically being responsive to even doing a PSA, a public service announcement around that. So that's something that we'll have to follow up with staff members. The committee also discussed concerns around bullying because we're noticing a variety of intense behavioral needs related to COVID or the pandemic and trying to get readjusted. And so from that, we were trying to strategize what's the best way to approach that. And at the time we settled on, see if we can arrange a one-on-one with the Chancellor of DCPS. We do acknowledge we also have to possibly think about the Public Charter Network how to engage around there. So open to ideas. But I think the reason why we landed on DCS Chancellor was because at the time, members raised specifically from DC public schools that they noticed some things, but we know the need is great around that. Lastly, we talked about our next steps for the Parent Advisory Council meetings. As members know, we agreed that we will start having a biannual parent council meeting, and we talked about details on how to get that up and running. We are hoping spring, so shooting for March. Trying to acknowledge that right now we knew we were going to get slammed with just again reopening, kind of getting readjusted after the holidays, and seeing what trends we were seeing with the pandemic. That's it. Do any members want to chime in? Any questions from anyone? I'll circle back around the two questions then for how could we do a PSA just around recruitment of staff, and how can we engage either the chancellor and other entities related to the social emotional need. Thank you.
Thank you. And then last up, teacher practice.
Good evening again. The Teacher Practice Committee plans to invite education preparation programs from UDC, American University, Howard University, and Georgetown University in January to learn more about their respective Grow Your Own initiatives and efforts. As we continue to advocate for publicly accessible data on teacher retention, we are also monitoring the implementation of Empower Ed's Rep DC proposal through OSSE, as we learn that OSSE has hired full-time employees for this work. That's basically all we did the last time we met. We spent a lot of time talking about the Grow Your Own initiatives and can't wait to our next meeting when we get to talk to those universities about their programs.
Awesome. Awesome. That concludes our committee reports. I'm swiftly moving along for members of the public. Representative Sutter is also traveling, and there's a bit of a time difference. So I appreciate her sticking with us. We are going to move to new business. And the reason why everyone is super excited and all smiles is because we are inviting our former student representative, Alex O'Sullivan, back to formally recognize his tremendous contributions to this body and to wish him well. And so what we're going to do, members, each member will have 1 minute. I know that is not a lot of time, but there's a lot of us to go. I'm going to ask Representative Sutter to go first. Should you need to sign off after that, feel free to do so. And Representative O'Sullivan, you will always have that title. We will formally vote at our public meeting on a ceremonial resolution for you that we will make sure you get, and you will also get a custom made State Board of Education plaque that has already been ordered and shipped to you that again just formally recognizes your tremendous contributions to the board. So with that, I'm going to also, because we can't formally do the 1 minute timer, I'm going to do it on my phone and I'll hold it up for you. And first up will be Representative Sutter.
Thank you so much, President Parker, for letting me go first. Representative O'Sullivan, there's no one else I would stay up for until 1 a.m. So it is 1 a.m. where I am, and I am delighted to stay up to say this for you. Alex, as a Ward 6 resident and a student representative for the past 3 years, you have displayed true leadership. I thought about the quote from Hamilton in the song Say Goodbye when George Washington is talking about the need to leave and let the country go on. He says about his position, I'll use it to move them along. And I think that is exactly what you have done for 3 years. You have continued to evolve the role of the student representative. You have expanded the work of the Student Advisory Committee, and the representatives you leave behind in your wake are absolutely amazing torchbearers that got there because of the true leadership you displayed. As a leader of your peers, it was evident that your colleagues enjoyed their time with you. They felt like the work that you set out for them was doable and that they were excited to collaborate. And I don't know how much more could be said about the value that that leaves for our board. So thank you, sir, for your service. And I cannot wait to see what comes next for you.
Thank you. Members, just for ease, I'm going to start with student reps, and then I'll just call in order ward. So we're going to start with Representative Johnson.
want to say, from just the short time span that I have known Representative Sullivan, I have formed a true friendship, and I have been shown some great leadership qualities. Not only is he full of amazing personality, but he does truly inspire everyone in the work that he does. And I am evidently confident that he's going to go on to do such great things further on in life. And he's very ambitious, and he's been really great to have as a colleague. And I am just so excited to see some of the things that he's going to continue on to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Representative Bernstein.
Yeah, so I haven't known Alex for that long formally in this space, but we like coexist in many other spaces together. And I can say he has always been super compassionate, and I have bombarded him with a lot of questions, and he's always open to answering them for me, and just being super supportive through the process of him transitioning out and me transitioning, into the role of a new student representative. And it is clear how much his peers look up to him and how much his leadership has meant to both the State Board of Education as a whole and the Student Advisory Committee separately. So thank you so much, Representative O'Sullivan.
Awesome. Next up, Representative Lopez.
Thank you. And I truly appreciate Representative O'Sullivan's leadership skills that he has portrayed since I met him back in like February of 2021. It has been great because I've learned so much from him. I've learned to step up, and I truly appreciate all of the skills that he has passed down to myself and everyone else that he surrounds himself with. I keep saying I truly appreciate it, but because I do, it's been great to work with him for the short time that I did get to work with him. It was fun when we had to get to things done and get focused. There was also time to just get to know him outside of the serious working space. So can't wait to see what goes on after you graduate, and I hope you're enjoying it.
Awesome. Next up, Representative or Vice President Gazoo.
Thank you. I already did sort of one round of accolades at the last meeting, so I will just say that it has just been such a great honor and pleasure to work with you, Representative O'Sullivan. And I think Representative Sutter stole my thunder a little bit by referencing Hamilton, because I have often thought of you when viewing Hamilton the many times I've watched it with Frankie. But it's like, yeah, Alex O'Sullivan is that brilliant. And I mean that. And I just am so excited to see what you do going forward. But I hope that this shower of love that you're getting here stays with you. We all mean every word of it. I know that I'm speaking for everyone when I say 1 minute is definitely not enough. But collectively, I hope you're really feeling like the full power of our appreciation for you.
Awesome. Next up, Representative Chen.
Representative O'Sullivan, I've really enjoyed the chance to work with you this last year, and the words that stand out for me are kindness and your curiosity. And we see that with all of the questions that you've asked over this last year. But also, I think those two words can imply a certain kind of neutrality, which also is not the case. I think when you have seen an injustice, you ask the right probing questions, but you also take a stance and call it out. And I really appreciate that mix of curiosity, kindness, but then also clarity in where your values are. So we'll miss you on the board. Hope we can keep getting your advice and guidance as we move this work forward. And thank you.
Next up is Representative Wattenberg.
Hello, I don't know if you were here earlier. I'm about to lose my voice, but I wanted to be here and say great things about you. It's really been tremendous to work with you, Representative O'Sullivan. It's just really been a treat, and it's really been an honor. And like everybody else says, looking forward to it, hearing what you do in the future. I hope that we have that you have learned something from us as much as we have learned from you. And I do want to kind of echo, I guess, what Representative Chang said. I appreciate so much your willingness to dig into the work, learn stuff, hear stuff, and I can hear the wheels clicking, and then ultimately a willingness to understand that there's a time to weigh in. And I really appreciate that. And some people, especially your age, but even at our age, weigh in too quickly. But I think you do a great job of really trying to hear. And I think that's a terrific way to be. So thank you for being with us. And I'm so sorry you're leaving, but do well on your classes.
Next up is Representative OLeary.
Alex, 77 years ago, I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. In August, Alex will be going to Cambridge, Massachusetts. There's got to be something spooky going on right there. My son's name is Alex. He's Alex O. He's Alex O. I don't have, I've got, can I have another 15 minutes so I can really talk about Alex? Everything that he's brought to the board for the last 3 years. He was my seatmate when we were live, but I know I don't have that time. So I just want Alex to know that I'm just a phone call away. And once the weather breaks, we're going to hit the batting cage. I love you, man.
Love that. Well, since Representative OLeary, I'm going next. Since Representative OLeary let the cat out the bag, I got a text a little while ago that said, "Oh, I got into Harvard." And my first response was, "Of course you did." And that is just representative of everything that folk have said here tonight. You're brilliant. And I think the only thing that's second to how brilliant you are, and I don't use that term lightly, is just how principled you are. Every time you ask questions, every time, honestly, respectfully, you challenge those who come before this board, I'm just always struck with how clear of a moral compass you have, that you don't waver. And only to meet your mom, does it make sense that you would turn out this way? And so kudos to your parents for just raising just a tremendous young man. I've appreciate the opportunity to grow as friends and as colleagues, and I definitely look forward to staying in touch. I have 8 seconds, but wish you all the best, Alex, and all your future endeavors, and I look forward to you changing the world. Next up, we have Representative Thompson.
So used to going after Representative Sutter. I will say that I want to be like Alex when I grow up. I like to be like a, I guess, big kid representative one day. I think Alex is one of those people who is just kind of like wise beyond his years. One thing that I'm always in awe of is when people can kind of ground themselves in who they are. And when people actually know the definition and live the definition of integrity, not as like a vocabulary word, but you are a person of integrity. It's not necessarily what your friends always like. It's not necessarily always what's popular. It's what is grounded in your personal values and principles. And that's something that, quite honestly, many people never learn. So thank you, Alex, just for being who you are. And I hope to be like you when I grow up and be a representative one day.
Next up, we have Representative Reed.
So Representative O'Sullivan, and you'll always be that to me because I know you'll always represent for the cause. I was in preparing for this moment, I know I emailed you Godspeed, and I was thinking for more words since getting the notice that we're going to do this, and I really can't get anything else. So I know that means that was for you, especially getting the news for today. So Godspeed, continue on your life's mission. We're rooting for you, and just keep giving back to the earth what has been instilled in you. Congrats, and thank you.
That was poetic. Representative Patterson.
Okay. I don't know what to say that hasn't been said, Representative O'Sullivan. From day one, I've been in awe of you. I'll just start there. I've just been awe of you as a person every single time that you spoke in a meeting, and how you represented and how you brought that voice, that authentic voice with integrity to every single statement that you made in representation of students. It's just so rare, unfortunately, that we get to see students like you perform and do so well in these particular situations, and you just killed it every single time. And you're just so awesome. You know, it's not surprising that you got to where you are, but keep doing what you're doing. You're such a good example for kids like mine. I have a little boy, and I can say this honestly, I hope my little boy grows up to be like you. Okay, I think that's the biggest compliment that I can give anyone, is that I hope my son grows up to be like you.
That is a huge compliment. Staff, I know I may be putting you all on the spot, but Mr. Hayworth or any other staff that may be near a phone, do you want to say any remarks while we have Representative O'Sullivan with us? You two will have 1 minute.
Thank you, President Parker. This is Mr. Hayworth, I suppose. Alex, just thanks. I mean, it's been great getting to know you, and I look forward to having you as a colleague and friend for a long time. So thank you.
Awesome. Not seeing any others. Darren, I'm not sure if you're there.
I'd love to say something. I mean, I'd love to say more than what 1 minute's worth, but just very quickly, I am just so excited to see what you do, Alex. You've done so much already, but I know I'll vote for you. In whatever capacity you're going to serve in, but you've done so much, and I really I just admire that in you, and you just hold such a high bar as a student, but also as a district resident. So just congratulations and good luck.
Awesome, thank you. I don't believe any other staff members are on. And
speech.
Representative O'Sullivan, I'm gonna give you the last words.
Okay, sure. Thank you, President Parker. Thanks to each of you guys. Man, it's hard not to let all the emotions out right here.
Let them out, man.
I don't know. For some reason, I mean, last night I was watching Avengers Endgame. I let them out when I was watching that movie. But I'm really, truly appreciative of everything that you guys have had to say individually, from all the stories that you shared of your time with me and everything that my time working with you has meant to you, and some of the compliments I received. I truly, I really can't imagine like a better moment for myself or for anyone to hear all those things. I really appreciate it so much, and I appreciate each of you so much. I didn't prepare a speech, but I was watching today's meeting on YouTube because I couldn't help myself. I didn't just want to go into the end of this meeting blind, having no clue what was happening. And there was one particular thing that really resonated with me as I was watching, and it's just like I find myself thinking about one particular board meeting that I was in. It was July 2020, a public meeting. If you guys remember, a lot of stuff happened that meeting for all the representatives who were on during then. A lot of stuff happened that meeting. But I remember if there was one particular instance I had to point to, where I'd say like, this is exactly what it is the State Board of Education is about, what their purpose is, and what it is like achieved. I'll always point to that meeting, because something that I saw is, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how many people we had during that public testimony time, but we had a lot of people. And I think that meeting ended at like 11 something. There were a lot of stuff happened in that meeting. And, the truth is there were a lot of opinions that were expressed on a number of issues. We were talking about SROs, the STAR framework, opening schools for in-person learning. There was a lot of stuff that was being said, and we heard a lot of different perspectives. But there was one thing and always resonates with me. And that's the DC State Board of Education is DC's only duly elected education body in the city. And I just think each of you should always remember that for all the work that you're doing this year, years to come, is that we are the people's voice in education. We are students' voice, we are parents' voice, we are teachers' voices. That's who you guys see show up during that public testimony time. You guys should remember that. And I think that there's one thing I want for you guys to just take away, and just for all the continuing discussions or all these issues, is that really, and it's unfortunate the state board doesn't have more power, but it has all the power in the sense that it gives people an opportunity to have their voice heard. We should not overlook that, and we should stay rooted in that. And I know that you guys will continue to do so, but that has been the prize, I think the treasure of my experience is getting to hear other students on the SAC, getting to hear, you all's perspectives, and having teachers, oftentimes during those public meetings share really honest and heart-wrenching and oftentimes heartbreaking testimony, but that's what it's about. And that's just the one thing I'll say. I'd be willing to talk offline with any of you guys and just go in depth more about how appreciative I am. But I'm so appreciative of this experience. And I know Juliana, Sky, and Leave are going to do a great job going forward. I know that. That's one thing I do know. And just from watching today's meeting, the board's in great hands, SAC's in great hands. Thank you guys so much. This has meant so much to me.
Well said, well said. The only duly elected educational body in the District of Columbia. And Representative O'Sullivan, it goes without saying that this body, a key part of its foundation and its growing influence in the district is a benefit of your work. So thank you. And we will be in touch. Members, are there other points of new business that we would like to put on the table at this time?
I'd like to mention that this is a Tidewater accent, but I was born in Boston, and my mother always parked the car in the Harvard yard.
Not quite new business, but we appreciate we appreciate that. Are there other points of new business? Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Representative Patterson, beach to the punch, made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There has been a motion and a second. All in favor of adjourning tonight's working session, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it, and this meeting is adjourned at 8:29 p.m. Thank you, members, for a great meeting.